Investigations Committee, Councilwoman Clark, we're getting started, ma'am. Thank you. It's Baltimore City Council Judiciary and Legislative Investigations Committee. We're here for two hearings tonight. I'm Councilman Eric Costello from the 11th District, Chair of the committee. We're joined by Councilwoman Mary Pat Clark, 14th District, Vice Chair of the committee. Councilman Leon Pinkett, 7th District, member of the committee. To my right, Councilman Robert Stokes, 12th District, member of the committee. And to his immediate right, Councilman Ed Reisinger, 10th District, member of the committee. To my immediate right is Matt Peters, staff to the committee. We're also joined by Jeff Amoros, representing Mayor Jack Young. We have Kaylin Young, Director of Legislative Director, for Councilman Brandon Scott, Kimberly Rubens, as well as Rebecca Tabb from Council President Scott's office. This hearing is being televised. Please make sure that you speak clearly into the microphone. If you do not speak clearly into the microphone, I will politely interrupt you to remind you. Please don't take offense to that. We are here for two hearings. The first one is Legislative Oversight 19-0051, alley cleaning, grass cutting, and boarding. The second one is Resolution 19-0136R, informational hearing, street sweeping. I understand that Director Chow is only going to be able to be with us tonight for about 45 minutes, plus or minus, due to travel arrangements. So we are going to call both hearings to order for the time being to maximize Director Chow's time with us. So with that, I'm going to very briefly turn it over to Councilman Pinkett to give a 30-second description on his hearing, which is the street sweeping one, and then we'll begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some time ago, as the street sweeping program in our city was expanded, it would be kind for me to say that there was some confusion, some angst in the community as we rolled out what we know is a good program for the community as we deal with stormwater management, throughout our city. And as a council person, received a lot of concern from our citizens as it relates to notification, enforcement, the efficiency of the program. And quite frankly, these were questions that I didn't have, and neither did my office have the capacity to always respond and answer to. And so it was, we thought it was beneficial to call the agency, Department of Public Works, into a hearing so that we could, have you all explain the program, how we've learned from our initial rollout, how we intend to make it more efficient, so that citizens know that we're taking their concerns seriously and hearing their concerns and then implementing them so that it's a part of the process as we move forward. So thank you for this opportunity tonight.
Thank you. I'm now going to ask Ms. Rubens from Council President Scott's office to give a very brief 30-second narrative around the resolution that the Council President introduced on alley cleaning, boarding, and grass cutting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a legislative oversight hearing to get all departments that touch three services, alley cleaning, grass cutting, and boarding, into the same room to understand the processes for each of these agencies, how they touch these three services, and identify operational efficiencies and best practices that can be shared across departments, as well as identify and support the solving of operational inefficiencies across these three services, across these 5 departments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We're going to start off with street sweeping. And Director Chow, what time are you here till 6?
Probably till 5:30 or so.
5:30? Okay.
Can I just do the intro on both of them?
Yeah. Give me 1 second. All right, Director, if you could start off with the street sweeping, do a 5 or 6 minute presentation on that, then we'll get to questions on that. And then when you have to leave, we're going to jump around a little bit, but yeah, please take it away on street sweeping, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Fellow council members, thank you for inviting us here tonight to talk about street sweeping. I just want to say a few things. That we have always been sweeping the city, sort of the streets in the central district for a number of years now. In 2014, we expanded the street sweeping into the quadrant for a couple purposes. One is to try to keep our city streets clean, and secondly is in support of our MS4 permit, our stormwater permit, basically removing any kind of debris, runoffs, and all that to be responsible in terms of trash TMDL. Now, I would say, as we continue to expand rollout in the central district, I would say the signage rollout, there were some ups and downs in terms of the difficulties and all that. I would say there were a lot of lessons learned, and I thank you first in advance for inviting not just DPW, but our fellow other agencies who has a play in this rollout. Because I think we would be successful as we all work from the same team, work on the same page. But I would say clearly there were a number of lessons learned, and I would tonight we will be talking about some of those lessons learned. What is our plan in terms of moving forward? And now we recognize certain things that perhaps we didn't do very well, and how those things can be helpful to us for future rollouts and so on and all that. And I would say there are a presentation that is going to be presented to you all. And I have asked the Bureau Head, Mr. John Chalmers, to be here tonight so he can go through the presentation as well as answer any questions you might have for of the presentation. But at this time, I'd be more than happy to answer any question you might have for me.
Mr. Chalmers, how long is your presentation?
It's a joint, I'm sorry. It's a joint presentation between the Department of Public Works and Department of DOT. So it's a little lengthy, not much. We can get through it quickly.
5 minutes.
I'll do my best.
Thank you, sir. Take it away. And then we'll get into questions after Mr. Chalmers' presentation.
So good evening, Council Chair, honorable committee members. My name is John Chalmers. I'm the Bureau Head for the Bureau of Solid Waste, and I'll walk you through this presentation as quickly as possible. So the first slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about the benefits of street sweeping. Sweepers use water and heavy brushes to actually clean the streets. More powerful at picking up debris than simply using the manual sweeper. The debris that is more than discarded food wrappers or bottles. It is the grit and the dirt that comes off of tires, the particulates from car exhaust, etc. Upstream solutions for keeping trash and other pollutants out of the harbor, which is more effective than trying to remove the materials after they enter the waterways. Municipal separate storm sewer system permit, better known as the MS4 permit, allows to discharge stormwater into the harbor as long as we meet certain requirements. Not to be confused with the consent decree, which is for our sanitary sewer system. Street sweeping has helped us meet the terms of our permit. The fiscal year 2018 MS4 annual report shows that street sweeping collected over 13,400 tons of debris in 1 year and swept 110 lane miles. I'm going to give you a quick overview of citywide street sweeping. Street sweeping dates back to the 1940s, but was previously focused on high-traffic gateways, and the rest of the city was done more sporadic by request as needed. Citywide sweeping, which started in April of 2014, was intended to cover ground more efficiently and resulted in fewer routes with more miles. Citywide schedule. The current schedule is for downtown is swept daily. The central district portion is swept weekly. The quadrant portion of the city is swept bi-monthly, and the gateways continue to have the same frequency, AM and PM routes. There's no opt-out for signage. Quadrants are swept monthly. Signs can be posted by request through a petition process of 60%. After the petition is completed, the Bureau Head approves and sends the memo to DOT requesting that the signs be posted. The signs are posted the time will be from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. on the regular sweeping day, which occurs on the Wednesday of each month. The northwest and southeast quadrant of the city is swept on the first and second Wednesday of the month. The northeast and southwest quadrant of the city is swept on the third and fourth Wednesday of the month. So here are some trends. Since the inception of the program back in fiscal year 15, as you can see, the tonnage collected and the miles swept have increased. With the installation of Phase 1 signage, we have had to temporarily suspend sweeping parts of Phase 1 area due to the need to take down signs and reinstall signs. In addition, inclement weather resulted in 15 days of cancellation of sweeping. This led to a decrease in FY18 sweeping. We expect sweeping to improve as we move forward. With ongoing cleaning efforts, increased education, and anti-litter campaigns, we expect to see a decrease in debris collected. So some of the challenges we faced. Obstacles in getting the street sweeps are included in the slide. We have days when we do not have enough CDL drivers to handle services. At times, drivers need to be reallocated to complete trash and recycling routes due to CDL shortages, and employees use leave and sick time. Transferring drivers to other services causes an avalanche effect on all solid waste services via delays. Teaching new drivers routes take time since we do not have GPS for them to follow. Teaching the public the importance of sweeping is key so that residents and businesses accept the signage and follow the restrictions. Parked vehicles limit the ability to sweep. So the Central District, as explained, the plan has been to install parking restrictor signs throughout the central portion of the city, which is to be swept weekly. The map provides a basic overview of the area of the Central District. The blue shows Phase 1, which is the western portion of the city, which was completed earlier this year. The red shows the planned area for Phase 2, which is currently in the planning stages. Phase 1 of the Central District. Signage installation requires a partnership between the department. I'm sorry, let me back up. Mr. Sharkey, I'll take this one. You want me to go through it?
Oh.
I can, I got it.
I mean, you could say it, we can
Okay, all right. So Phase 1 of the Central District signage. Signage installation requires a partnership between the Department of Transportation and Department of Public Works to be successful. DPW and DOT work together on Phase 1 in the Central District signage, meeting regularly to discuss routes, schedule communications, and implementations. DPW provided the routes, which is received from the consultant to DPW, also responded to community concerns and provided outreach. Lessons learned. Phase 1 of the implementation of Baltimore City's citywide street sweeping program provided a number of learning opportunities. These lessons learned will be applied as both DOT and DPW partner in implementing Phase 2. Lessons learned included the sizes of the signs ordered required signs to contractor out rather than being assembled DOT in-house signs. Large external contracts are generally handled by DOT Transportation Engineering and Construction Division. TEC services, tech services were responsible for reviewing the installation of street signs installed in general, a practice that reviewed by members of DOT Traffic Division. The tech oversight, rather than traffic oversight, along with the initial deployment of signs by street name rather than by street sweeping route, led to a number of signs being installed incorrectly. Incorrectly placed signs had to be taken down and replaced with correct signage, slowing down the implementation of Phase 1. Phase 2 implementation will be supervised by the Traffic Division, and signs will be installed according to the designated street sweeping route. Getting a detailed installation schedule was difficult, making it difficult to communicate to residents. Phase 2 of the Central District posting. DPW will manage the contract in coordination with DOT. DOT will inspect the signs installed. Estimate cost for this project is about $2 to $3 million. Implementing lessons learned, carefully vetting routes before signs are installed. Consider having contractors place hang tags as part of the contract. Installing signs by routes so that trucks can service routes once signs are installed. Coordinating enforcement efforts and start times. Communication plan, briefings, mailers, hang tags, social media. Timeline, purchasing Route Smart improves route using Route Smart Wear. DOT site field inspections, contract completion and review, interagency MOU, scope of work, procurement process, notice to proceed, ordering signs, posting of signs. We're looking at, it's going to be about, to get this all implemented up and running, we're looking at maybe one and a half years from now to get this actually in place. Route Smart minimizes non-productive times and miles traveled by sweepers per day, minimizing potential overtime pay and overall fuel consumption. Will reduce customer complaints and streets not swept. Applied for innovation fund of $270,000 for a one-time expense and $32,000 as an ongoing expense for Route Smartware. DOT's role in Phase 2 will be to inspect the signs installed and to provide technical assistance. DPW will manage the contract in Phase 2. Parking enforcement. In addition to managing the assembly and installation of parking restriction signs that are critical towards the overall success of Baltimore City-wide street sweeping program, DOT is also responsible for enforcing the parking restrictions that are in place or designed on designated street sweeping routes. Parking enforcement falls under the umbrella of DOT's Safety Division and is conducted by their traffic enforcement officers. In addition to the enforcement of street sweeping parking restrictions, DOT are responsible for enforcing meter parking, residential permit parking, responding to and managing congestions associated with the rush hour traffic, major events, and emergency, etc. 125 of 142 TEO positions are currently filled. DOT capacity to adequately enforce new parking restrictions associated with the implementation of Phase 2 of the citywide street sweeping program is largely dependent on the total mileage of street sweeping added parking restrictions. In conclusion, street sweeping is a very important program for compliance with the city's MS4 permit and an essential program for cleaning the city. DOT and DPW will work together to implement Phase 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chalmers. What is the plan for city council outreach on this? Because as best I can tell from this map, this includes portions of the 7th, which is Pinkett, the 11th Costello, the 9th Bullock, 1st Cohen, 14th Clark, 12th Stokes, 13th Sneed. That's just me eyeballing the map here, but
I hope.
winter.
So we have a
What is happening to the mic?
All right, I'm back. So we have a marketing and communication plan, a full comprehensive marketing and communication plan, which I can share with you, which includes briefing the city council, briefing the communities that this will touch prior to implementing or installing any signs well in advance. But I can send that to you.
And what's the timing for when the council will get those briefings, plus or minus?
As soon as we're able to get the contract in place, I can give you a better timeline on when we're going to start notifying folks. Lessons learned from the prior installation of Phase 1, this started back in 2014. We started installing signs in 2018. We didn't circle back, so we want to get everything lined up. So in real time, as we're talking to folks, we're moving the program forward, and they'll see the results.
And BBMR Finance has agreed to your innovation fund request?
I have not gotten a follow-up from them yet.
We received the application in February. We reviewed them on a rolling basis. We haven't approved it yet. I believe it was for general funds. Street sweeping is funded out of the stormwater fund, so we might look there first. But if you wanted to use the innovation fund to use the stormwater fund and pay it back through savings, that is a mechanism by which to review it. But it's pending approval and review.
So the worst case scenario is that we use stormwater enterprise utility funds for this if the innovation fund does not come through?
I think that we need to have further discussion on that. I mean, the stormwater fee is being used for actual sweeping the streets, right? So now we're talking about signages, enforcement.
No,
and
I'm
so
talking
on.
about the software that Mr. Chalmers was talking about.
Yeah, that will be enterprise.
So
So
funding
not-
shouldn't be a problem, correct?
I believe the request was to utilize general funds to fund that request. I think we need to review it and follow up, but presumably as sweeping is funded out of the stormwater fund, you'd fund software out of that fund as well.
Okay, today is July 17th. Can you follow up with the committee within 1 week with an answer on how we're going to fund it? Thank you. Councilman Pinkett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know there's quite a few questions, so I'll just ask a couple and then I can come back. But I want to dovetail on the line of question that you just asked as it relates to where the money would come from for the software. Are there, I guess, excess resources in the stormwater fund that could be used for this? Why would we even be considering general fund for this expense? Is it not adequate resources in the stormwater fund to provide for the software?
So we submitted a request through the Innovation Fund hoping to get a grant to move forward, but we have identified funding and we are moving forward one way or the other with the routing software.
Right. I mean, I understand. I'm just saying, why are we even making the request to the Innovation Fund?
Funds and for the Bureau, they're tight. So, I'm trying to, utilize my funding as best possible. And if there was a way to, kind of stretch the dollar, that was a thought.
No, I understand. I'm just saying that we can talk more about it as this hearing goes on. There appears to be excess funds available in the stormwater fund for these types of activities. Why would we even consider trying to get money from the innovation fund for this when there's money already there for the street sweeping activities?
First of all, dear Councilman, there isn't any kind of excess dollars in stormwater fees.
Okay.
Right? Stormwater fees are we collected for the purpose for MS4, and we're very fortunate now. We actually float the very first bond to the bondholders, and now we can begin to focusing on some of infrastructure above and beyond the MS4. Because as you know, we have a number of sinkholes in the cities. Many of them caused by stormwater pipelines, which are more than a century old, is collapsing and all that. So lots of that is going to be funneled towards those capital programs. Now, when we're talking about Route Smart, we recognize the importance of Route Smart, right? So that's why we made the pitch to the Innovation Fund to see if we can get funding for it. But certainly, we recognize the importance of it. We got to keep this trend, keep moving forward. While there's no decision in terms of whether we're going to get Innovation Fund for the Route Smart software or not, we have already identified internally through resources, reallocations, and all that, so we can at least allow this software purchase to proceed. That's where we are right now.
So is Route Smart a new program?
It's basically, we recognize the Route Smart is, in the simplest way to explain, is that we have a tremendous turnover in terms of drivers in our sweeper operations. So every time we got a new driver comes in, it takes a long time to learn the actual route. So one unique advantage of that Route Smart software is it's going to give you turn-by-turn instructions. So in other words, anyone coming in, CDL drivers, and after minimal training, we can put them behind the wheels because the Route Smart software, the screen is going to tell them turn right next street, turn left next street. So they don't have to memorize the actual routes itself, which was the very time-consuming portion on the front end traditionally. So we think that this is going to yield tremendous value in terms of efficiencies, that aspect, not to say put our drivers on the road behind the wheels or those sweepers that much quicker and sooner.
No, I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying that the program, I guess, has been in place since 2014. Why don't we already have Route Smart in place?
Well, I would say just only a couple of years ago, that same question was asked by me to my staff, my IT folks, is find me a software can actually do the turn by turn, and they couldn't find a software to do that. And I would say that that whole GPS technology has really, making leaps and bounds in terms of advancement. We were able to find a software program that can actually do what we initially desired to do.
Does the software also help us to make certain that people are actually doing the routes that they're supposed to do?
Absolutely.
Does Route Smart do this?
The actual, we have software that monitors, for example, the boom coming down, right? So if the boom's up, you're not really sweeping.
Right.
So anytime you put the boom down, that's, so we actually tracking those actual operations in terms of time.
So is that software, are we using that software now?
That's based on AVL.
We're currently using that software
Yeah.
right now, or is that something we have to purchase as well?
No, that's our AVL software that's already in existence, right? But I know purchasing is looking at updating that AVL technology. That part, I'm not sure where it is in terms of procurement, but there is an existing AVL program.
Okay. If I can just ask one other question. I know, but I want to be fair, because this when we in the presentation, it's lessons learned. It said signs to be installed by route, not by street name. What does that mean?
So when I took over this program back in 2017, I started getting a lot of complaints in. There was a lot of confusion with the drivers on how they completed the routes. And I pulled the contractor in and realized that they were installing the signs based on street names. So that causes, multiple problems. One, an inefficiency in managing the operation because they're not installing the signs based on a route. So we had to switch that out. Pick a route, use a route, install it from beginning to end. So once that last sign goes up, we can start sweeping that particular route.
So who's responsible for sign installation?
So DOT was leading the charge for sign installation. Again, this was the contractor who took the list and did not, install the signs by route. And when we realized that, we made the switch. Myself and DOT sat down at the table and we made the correction.
So just reading into this, the contractor could literally have been out there installing signs alphabetically, as opposed to, so you could have a route and they could just be going from A to B to C to D and be in no coordination. And the reason I'm saying is this kind of stuff is what really made people really confused, because all of a sudden, one street would get a sign and then they wouldn't see anything, and then another street all of a sudden would pop up and get signs, and so we would get calls, and I had no rhyme or reason to explain to people, and that's why I'm looking at this now. Now it makes sense. Right. When somebody on Ashburton all of a sudden gets a sign, and then Bradish Avenue gets a sign, and then Callow gets a sign, and people going, where's this popping up? So.
Yeah. So, Councilman, I would say that was one of the most significant lesson learned from that first phase rollout. I mean, the contractor, and certainly we're not placing any blame on anything or anyone, but the thing is that what they did was they were rolling out the signage installation based on geographic. So they're starting from one tip and working down, but the actual our sweeping routes may cut across. So from that lesson learned, we know as we installing the signs geographically, those neighborhoods may have two routes crisscrossing. So in other words, it's really causing a lot of confusion. You were right, and I think this time in the phase 2, the lesson learned is that we're going to follow the route. So we're going to start the route number one sign and finish the route last sign, and then that means that route is completed, then we can actually start sweeping to minimize all those confusion. And I would say that, to me, that was the most significant lesson learned in the first phase rollout. And we took it to heart, we corrected, and we're gonna make sure this time we're gonna get it done correctly by the department.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, if I can also, because I wasn't really sure if I saw this.
Councilman, I got to come back to you.
Yeah, that's okay.
Mr. President, and we've been joined by Council President Brandon Scott. Mr. President.
Mr. President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Director Child, thank you for being here. I just want to go back to something you said in response to the councilman, and this is something that I've asked before about the street sweeping program and not having GPS or route application for the drivers. I just want to make sure that I heard this correct. You said that your staff told you that there was no such software available?
Going back several years, the request was proactively instructing a driver in a turn-by-turn instruction. Going back several years, my staff look at in the market to see if there's such a software out there. They didn't find one, but this time around, we were able to find this Route Smart software actually can do this proactive turn-by-turn instructions.
And just, for me, that's extremely disappointing because anyone with a smartphone knows that you can program Google Maps to make routes for you and give out those things ahead of time, and those kind of technologies have existed for such a long time. But, and I'm sorry I came in on the tail end of that. Where are you in the process of rolling that out?
Go ahead, John.
So we're working through the contract process. We started off with the Innovation Fund, but there is a contractor on board that we've sat down, we met with. They have the technology that we're looking for. We went with several other contractors who came in, sat down, told us that, you know what, we have this turn-by-turn software for your vehicles, and they just didn't have it. Route Smart has it. So we're in the process of putting that contract out to bid, because we have to put it out to bid, but they actually have the turn-by-turn that we need for these drivers.
And Mr. Chalmers, just to follow up, are you able to work with their developers, their coders, to make sure that their software is able to be specific for Baltimore, but also to change based off of conditions in the city? For example, streets that dead end and start in different places and all of those kind of things?
Absolutely. Those were some of the lessons learned sitting down talking to some of the other vendors that just couldn't come through, but yes.
And another question and follow-up for you, Director Chow. You said that currently, right now, when the sweeper is not down, you guys know when it's not down. But if we don't have the ability to know, or as the councilman said, to point out like which streets are being missed on the route, how do we then know? Because if I'm a driver, I can have that street down, that sweeper all day long. But if I'm not on the right street, then it doesn't really matter. And I think that and I know the councilman represents one of those areas, like he represents in Northwest or Northeast Baltimore, where I live, other places that are outside of the central area, or down in South Baltimore, where Councilman Reisinger lives. We know that those areas are still not getting the level of street sweeping that they deserve, and that we told them that they were going to get when we went to move this program citywide and we went to the quadrant system. So I say that to say, can you guys tell me what lessons we've learned in the system and what things are we going to do to make sure that those citizens are getting the service and not getting it 2 years from now, but within the next 3 to 6 months? What are we going to do? Because we've had this program since 2014, and I know for a fact there are streets in my neighborhood that haven't been swept since I drove the sweeper myself. So what are we going to do to make sure that citizens in Baltimore are getting the service that we say they're getting soon?
So thank you for the question, Council President. I would say, current our AVL system, right? So basically is the vehicle tracking system, locating system. So we rely on a couple of things. One, obviously, the supervisors coming behind the sweeper to making sure they've done what they're supposed to do. That's one manual way. A second way is that we actually can go into the AVL software. We can actually look at the streets they were on, and that give us that map view in terms of that. That's something that we can do now, right? And then the part of the in terms of budget hearing, if you remember, I mentioned that Mr. Chalmers has recently stood up an office called, it's basically Support Services Division. So those that division is created for the purpose of looking at these from the analyst perspective, to double checking for quality assurances and so on and all that. And I would say once Route Smart software comes into play, that software actually going to be able to tell us when they instruct the operator to make a right, that they actually make a right turn. And then couple that with the AVL software and all that, we'd be able to overlay that technology to give us better information in terms of what's going out there in the real field condition.
But just to piggyback on that, Route Smart is key to everything that we do, and also having adequate drivers on staff. But Route Smart, the beauty about that, it's going to, like the director said, for the support service office, it's going to show a route, and we'll be able to look at that route at any given time throughout the day and see where they started, where they are, how much more they have to finish. We don't have that capability of doing that right now with just the AVL system. So that's why it's crucial for those two components, Route Smart and getting some drivers in.
So, and to go to your point about the drivers, so the drivers that are driving the sweepers, are they temporary or full-time city employees?
Right now, I believe we have a total of 27 drivers in that operation. I believe 2 or 3 may be seasonal maintenance aides.
So the majority of them are.
They are.
Great.
Yes,
And
contractual employees.
but the majority of them are full-time city employees.
Yes.
Correct. Thank you. And the last thing on that before I go to my other point, based on the system that you have now, can you provide to the council and to this committee data about mapping, about areas that have been missed, how many times they have been missed, but also what corrections have been made for that? What things have been put in place? Have people, we don't need to know names, of course, have people been reprimanded for not completing their route? These are the kind of things that the council members need to know and be able to see. So one, that they can go back and tell the citizenry if their street is being missed, that they have to let you know and let them know. And two, so that they can also do a better assessment of the program in its totality.
Well, right now we rely on a couple of things, and one is the 311 system. I would encourage everyone who street is missed to call 311, create that service request as many times as they need to create it, because we use that as one of the key performance indicators of what's taking place in the field. So we have each supervisor has a checklist of what happened the current week to go back out and do a follow-up. But that's the check and balance that we have right now.
Thank you. Just to go to related but different topic, just some operational questions, how many unique street miles are swept every year?
Every year?
Yeah.
That was on the slide. It's about 110 lane miles were swept just this past fiscal year.
Well, what I mean by that is that, okay.
So I can tell you in fiscal year 13, we swept 97,000 miles. In fiscal year 14, 96,000. Fiscal year 15, 97,000. Fiscal year 16, 111,000. Fiscal year 17, 110. 18, 110. And 19, 106.
Thank you. I think that, and I appreciate that, Mr. Chalmers, but I wanted to see even if you guys have the capability to give us unique lane miles, right?
Yes, so we do have lane miles by route. We track that every 2 weeks. We know what each route yields on a 2-week basis, a bi-weekly basis.
Yeah, can you provide that to the chairman, please?
Yes.
Thank you. And does your department track tonnage collected also by neighborhood, by route, and by quadrant?
It's by route.
By route?
And many routes run through many different neighborhoods, so it's kind of hard to capture.
And then last thing, does DPW conduct periodic nutrient and chemical testing pre and post sweeping to confirm that there is a meaningful pollutant removal?
That I'm going to have to defer to the water side of the house. I'm quite sure there's some kind of check and balance.
Mr. Director, just to repeat the question, does the agency conduct periodic nutrient and chemical testing pre and post sweeping to confirm that there is meaningful pollutant removal based on the program?
I don't believe we're doing that currently. I mean, basically, we know the sweepers are as they sweeping down the curb line and so on, all that, picking up the debris and all that, is really preventing those trash from entering the stormwater system.
Yeah.
So it's not for
So
sanitizing the streets and so on.
a follow-up question would be for you guys to, I don't know if you've done this already, to hold our street sweeping program up against other cities' street sweeping programs and see what, if they're doing these kind of things, and to see what they're doing, right? What concrete improvements that we can make based off of looking at other cities and seeing what they're doing with their program.
Absolutely.
I'm done for now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Clark.
Thank you. I'd like to talk about Phase 2, if I could. When I'm looking at this, I'm looking at the red and the blue, and Mr. Chow, I think you have to depart us, do you not?
Yes, thank you very much. And Mr. Chalmers here, and certainly, Mr. Steve Sharkey is here as well from DOT. Steve, I'm trying to figure out DOT, DGS, so DOT.
Yes,
so,
right.
And I'm sure they are here to prepare to answer any question you might have. And then if I can't answer any questions, you send it to me and we can return it in written
Thank
form.
you.
Thank you
Don't
very much.
miss your whatever vehicle it is that you have to get on. Thank you. So I'm looking at this for the moment, and because we're talking about the posted, don't park here, we're going to tow you away sweeper program, right?
That's correct.
Right. And we're not going to talk, are we going to talk later maybe about the voluntary program too?
We can. I walked through it in the presentation very briefly, but I can answer your
Right.
question.
Well, let me just focus on what we're doing.
Okay.
I'm concerned about what I'm concerned about is you are already in the process of completing the red one, the Phase 2, right?
We're in the beginning. We're in the beginning phases of putting together a contract for Phase 2.
Okay. So what's the divider? Is it Charles Street, Greenmount? What's dividing the blues from the reds?
I can provide you with I can give you I can give you communities. So it's going to be Reservoir Hill and Bolton Hill would be the dividing line. So we're somewhere. So the dividing line right now between Phase 1 and Phase 2 is somewhere around Mount Royal.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people that live in my district already have the posted signs, and they get twice a week one side and then the other side every week, or sometimes even more than that. Like in the Chum neighborhood, the Coldstream Homestead Montebello neighborhood, that around City College,
Right.
going from the Alameda to to Hillen. All that area is posted.
Mm-hmm.
Question, is that area going to expand? The ladies keep, not lately, but they used to ask me all the time, because a couple mayors ago, there was the announcement that the posted sweeping would expand, not all over the city, but in what is expand in the areas where it already is. So it would go out from the areas where it is somewhat. So I'm trying to figure out how far north and east this goes.
Unfortunately, I don't have that detailed information with me. I can definitely get back to you. But if they fall within the central district, we are going to go through and expand, and it's a possibility that the current street sweeping schedule may change. That's going to be part of the outreach.
Oh, wow, so
right.
they might have a different
They might have a different
set of days.
Yeah, keep in mind that prior to implementing citywide mechanical street sweeping, it was installed on an ad hoc basis. Someone would call in, request street
Oh.
sweeping, and
And they get it because they petitioned.
correct. So that wasn't the most. That's
We
not,
like that.
But that's not the most efficient way to run a program. And the footprint, the central district, is really where we have our last opportunity to capture that debris before it makes its way into our storm
Right.
drain. So
So do you know, I mean, do you have dimensions just for the central district?
what I can do, Councilwoman, I can send you the map that has all the street names on it, because as you can see, it's not one particular line. It kind of goes all over the
I
place.
know.
Right. So I can actually send you the map, and that's one of the other things we're going to do in phase 2. We want to stand up on the website a map that the residents can go into, type in their address, and they can figure out what their days are, when is street sweeping coming, and all those good things. So that's going to be part of the strategy as we implement and move forward in phase 2. So
So phase 2 being to increase the streets that are already in the central district that are posted, to add to there.
correct. That is correct.
All right, so let me ask you this. You said that there are 27 drivers. I presume that's per day. So I'm just trying to figure out how many people are doing this work. Now, these are the posted routes, and they're different every day, obviously, because they happen twice a week to a street, to a route. But there are so many routes across the city, across these two portions of the city, right?
Correct.
So you have 27, basically FTE drivers doing all that work, is that correct?
That's correct.
So is that a one-person crew, or there are 2 people to a sweeper?
So that's a one-person crew, one operator to a vehicle.
Okay. So how many vehicles does that require? How many, is 27?
So we have, in our fleet, we have a total of 40 mechanical street sweepers. 2 are assigned to our environmental service operation, which is the Quarantine Road landfill, and the other 38 are assigned to the mechanical street sweeping operation.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I was writing down and I wasn't,
So for this particular operation, we have 38 assigned vehicles for mechanical street sweeping, but the Bureau as a whole has 40.
oh, I see, okay. So you've got 27 drivers, you've got 38 vehicles. That means you've got backup when things fall apart, right?
That's correct.
And what's your rate of being able to put 38 mechanical street sweepers out every day?
Well, so the program, so we have 3 of those 38 that work on nights. Well, we actually manage I-83, 87, I-70, and major gateways during the night with 3 of the mechanical street sweepers, so they're assigned to that operation. As part of the mechanical street sweeping operation, we also have our AM and PM routes. The AM routes are also managing the gateways in the AM from 5 in the morning to 1 p.m. in the afternoon, and then we have the PM routes that start at 11 a.m. To 7 p.m. So that's 5 on the AM and 5 on the PM.
So
for
you're
the-
covering, so you're using your crews and your vehicles to cover a whole lot of people, 5 to 1.
It's 10, right, there's got that. AM, PM is going to be 10 vehicles, which leaves us 18 for the other operation. Then another 3 is going to be for the night operation, which leaves us 15 for the central district operation. Quadrant sweeping is only done on Wednesdays, and Wednesdays we require 30 mechanical street sweepers.
I'm sorry, what is quadrant sweeping?
So quadrant sweeping is the outer portions of the city. For instance, again, the northwest, southeast quadrants, and I can send this information over to you, and it's all on a nice detailed map. Those are the portions of the city where it's swept on a voluntary basis. We ask residents to move their car. It's, towards the county line of the city.
So when you're counting all these drivers and you're counting all these mechanical sweepers, are you covering the voluntary program as well as the posted program?
That's correct. So so the central district is swept on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays.
Okay. And so Wednesday's the big day for
City for the quadrant sweeping. Quadrant sweeping is only done on Wednesdays.
right. And are you able to keep? So it sounds as if you've got your mechanical sweepers are working to a degree that you're not losing time because of breakdowns.
That is correct.
That's really good news.
Yeah. Our issue, again, is getting the software that we need, getting the manpower, the resources to keep the program moving forward.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Councilman Reisinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chalmers, I don't know whether you can answer this question since the director left, but maybe someone in his department can. When we did the stormwater management legislation, that money, as far as I'm concerned, was supposed to go to cleaning the streets, to make sure that stormwater outlets were clean and it wasn't going into the bay. My question is 100% of that money going into DPW in your department, or is some of it going into the water department? Can anyone answer that?
I believe we get a piece of it, and out of.
You get a piece of it?
As a matter of fact, hold up.
See, this is, I know Marcia can answer this, but Mr. Chair and Mr. President, of the 24 years I've been in the council, for the director of the DPW, as important as this is, to leave unless he has someone that died in his family or whatever. I'm not being rude, but he should have been here and he should have stayed here to listen to our complaints. And when I say to the chair that if we can't get these answers, these questions answered, he needs to come back, because when he gets his paycheck, it doesn't just say the mayor, it says mayor and city council. So, first of all, I'm surprised that he was here tonight, but then he left. So, I'm totally upset about how this is going. And Ms. Collins, I'm sorry, I'm not going in blame mode into you, Mr. Chalmers, or Peggy Smallwood, but there's a big issue in DPW. When our mayor says his priorities is crime and grime, and we're sitting here about crime, and the director of DPW walks out. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Really?
I just want you to understand, Councilman, that when the hearing was scheduled, his schedule wasn't consulted, so it became a problem, but he did delay his scheduled activity enough so that he could at least be here initially, and he did not leave to insult this group at all. This was his attempt to try and at least be here for as long as he could to participate and to help answer your questions. We have with us today Ms. Kim Grove, who knows a lot about stormwater and the process we went through for the stormwater fee. The simple answer, if I understood your question correctly, sir, for the street sweeping portion of what John and his team perform, that is being funding completely with stormwater funding. There are other activities that are covered by the stormwater fee that Kim can speak to if you would like to hear that this evening.
Well, listen to Mr. Chalmers. She said part of it. So if someone could clarify, it's our understanding it was supposed to go to personnel and resources to clean the streets, but go ahead.
Kim Grove with the Department of Public Works, and yes, the operations for street sweeping is completely funded by the stormwater fee. In the past, since the stormwater fee has been incepted, it has shared a partial funding with the general fund, but as of 2 years ago, the stormwater fee and therefore the utility has funded that entire operation.
Right.
That's a street sweeper. What about the rest of it? I mean,
No.
regards to illegal dumping or cleaning alleys in streets?
So-
Excuse me, if my memory serves me well, that money was supposed to help toward employees that work in the dump trucks or the Bobcats. No?
No.
No. So the Bureau's funded through the general fund. The rest of the operations are funded through the general fund.
Okay.
The reason why we were able to put a connection with the stormwater utility fee and street sweeping is that there was already a accounting guidance document out from the Maryland Department of Environment that was able to show that street sweeping had a direct correlation to nutrient removal, and that's why we were able to justify that funding. But the state set certain requirements of how the stormwater fee and therefore the utility could be used, and we are working within those strict guidelines.
Okay, I stand corrected on that. So are you telling me that none of that money, so what are you using the rest of it for then?
So there are other categories, including the operations for plans review and inspection, the water quality monitoring of our streams, the utility maintenance of the entire stormwater sewer system, the capital projects that are both related to the gray infrastructure as well as the MS4 projects that were included in our watershed implementation plan.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair, the other thing that I want to bring up is like, I want to piggyback or respond to what the president was saying in my district. Mr. Chair, you sit on the LDC and also with the South Baltimore Gateway Partnership, and there's money that's coming from the LDC through the casino, which is designated to DPW and the police department. So when it comes to DPW, from the beginning, I'm going back years ago, that the objective was money to go to DPW to keep the streets clean, the alleys clean, in that footprint of the LDC and the South Baltimore Gateway Partnership. I drive into the city, especially off of Caton Avenue from where I live into 295. Before you hit the casino, I went by there this morning, this afternoon, I mean, there's still trash. It looks like they're not picking that up, to clean that up. And the same way with Westport and some other areas of Pigtown, it just seems that, you know, the money's there, but it's not being implemented or utilized for that area. It isn't until I get to the casino that I see that one block is absolutely clean, but before you get there, it's still dirty, and it's stuff that's sitting there I see for a week or 2 weeks that's not being cleaned up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Stokes?
I guess if, I gotta make this comment, if everybody swept in front of their own door in the alley, we wouldn't be having all these hearings. My question is probably to Mr. Goodwin. I think they TEOs, am I correct? Because we talking about enforcement. Can you give us the numbers of how many you already have hired and how many we got vacancies? And the reason why I ask that is I get calls from community and business that says when people don't move their car and the mechanical sweeper come past, this trash still sitting there. And I know you are short. Usually you would have one of your TEOs to either give them a ticket, because that's enforcement, and it's not happening. I know you're short on employees, but that's part of enforcement. And I get so many calls about that happening, about people leave their cars, 2 and 3 cars, and the mechanical sweeper, we got to go around it, but the trash is still there. And unfortunately, people don't sweep in front of their door. So that's what I'm asking you, are your capacity, your employees up to capacity in terms of everybody being hard for that enforcement?
No, sir. We have approximately 6 vacancies as of today. Toby Goodwin, DOT Safety. We have approximately six vacancies as of today, and we're actively recruiting to bring individuals in, as well as we're working on a special project that we're working with BBMR to try to get some part-time personnel in as well that could help us with RPP as well as street clean.
And just one more statement. North Avenue from Asker Street to Wolf Street, we did streetscaping, and from the medium strip on Broadway. Who cleans that? Because Broadway is a boulevard, and it look a mess sometimes. Sometimes the grass not cut. Sometimes trees break off, and the limbs just laying there, and it's trash up and down Broadway in the medium strip. North Avenue, that's a boulevard. You ride there, you see plastic bags hanging in trees, and I know people walk past. So I know when we first did the streetscape, the developer was responsible for keeping that North Avenue from Asker Street to Wolf Street clean. They haven't been doing it. I don't know how long their contract was to clean it, but they're not cleaning it. And Baltimore look dirty when we got a boulevard, those two boulevards that look like they look, and you ride up and down there, and it's just trash everywhere. So my suggestion is, or my question is, who is responsible for the medium strip in Broadway, and who is responsible for that what happened on North Avenue when we did the Asker Street to Wolf Street, because it's dirty. And every time I ride past, it looks like it's not getting clean, it's not getting no attention.
So let's start with the Broadway. So Broadway meeting.
Good evening. Kenneth Ching.
Yeah, Steve Sharkey.
Bureau of Operations for DOT. In reference to the maintenance of the median on Broadway, that is DOT's maintenance division responsibility. That corridor is actually contracted out through our contractor, Lorenz. It is on a regular maintenance schedule. It's cleaned and cut every 14 days, which is actually a 2-week cycle, and in a season from April to November, it is approximately 16 services / cuts per year, and if additional work is required, it is taken care of. However, in regards to the intersection of Broadway and North Avenue that you just mentioned, that particular intersection on the south side of Broadway was actually part of the North Avenue streetscape project. It has not just grass, but it has special plantings in that a lot of people really didn't recognize. Since then, and it was brought to our attention because of a photo that was sent that it looked like it was a bunch of weeds in it, I had my contractor go out there and clean up that end cap. And if you go out there today, you'll see that it has been cleaned, mulched, and the weeds have been removed. Also, along the corridor of North Avenue, the tree pits on the right-of-ways on both the north and south side have been addressed to the best of our ability. And hopefully that will resolve that particular issue, and we are definitely looking in other avenues to try to get these kind of gateways under a real maintenance schedule, especially for those that are not already under contract. But outside of those two issues, I think it's pretty much being well maintained to the best of our ability with the resources and the challenges that we face today.
So North Avenue is the 14 to 15 day like Broadway?
North Avenue itself, no, sir. It has not been incorporated in such a schedule like that because, as you know, before the streetscape project came in, it did not have those kind of items that needed to be addressed at that time. There wasn't as many tree pits along North Avenue on that end.
I have one, Ms. Wimbush, I know you were part of that. Was the developer responsible for keeping that streetscape clean, I guess, the first year and a half, am I correct?
Councilman Stokes, I'll have to get back to you. I
Okay.
don't have the answer to that question, but we'll follow up tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Council President Scott. colleagues, we're cycling back through. Pinkett.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to ask a question, another question about the street sweeping program for a second. And Mr. Chalmers specifically talking about the amount of CDL drivers that are unable to work and on light duty. And I have a copy of the Bureau's light duty / A time report, and it says that there are 8 CDL drivers unable to work and an additional 6 drivers that are on light duty or restricted duty. Can you talk about the department's policies and procedures to get these individuals back to work?
Yes, I can, Councilman. That number actually, bear with me one second. The number you're looking at is only that you said it was 8?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So to give you an overall update of, right now we have 50 vacant positions in the Bureau. 24 are CDL drivers. And as it relates to A-time and restricted duty, we have a total of 36 employees on either A-time or restricted duty, and of that, 14 are CDL drivers.
Thank you.
So the process for a CDL driver, depending on their injury, they are sent to Mercy Clinic and followed, and they go through the process of getting them well, bringing them back to work, and depending on the injury in an individual, it could be quite lengthy.
Is there a specific, is there like a time, I know in some other agencies, there's a specific time that folks have to return back to work, or they have to, you know, retire or do other things. Can you just speak about that policy for DPW? Because, you know, me, I want people to return to work when they're absolutely healed and absolutely ready and able to go back to doing their job. But at the same time, with the city's history, we also have to be very wary of people staying out longer than they need to.
So there's a process. I don't know all of I can't get into details, but I can tell you there's a process, and if an employee is out for a certain amount of time, they have exerted all avenues for this person to heal and be able to come back to work. We have what we call an options process. And that process can take quite a bit of time. We're talking maybe 6 months depending on the individual and depending on the individual circumstances, because sometimes the individual may get well, come back to work after being out 90 days, and then 30 days into it, they're back out again. So we track all of our A-time and restricted duty. We meet on a monthly basis with key risks to, revisit these cases and figure out how to move forward. But that's pretty much the process.
And I don't know if anyone from DPW is able to tell us like the timeline for these processes. Anyone here able to give us that information?
Unfortunately, our HR folks are not here
Stop for
tonight.
1 second. The ceiling is leaking again. So, can you provide that to the chair of the committee and the committee, please? The timeline, the processes, how those options work, so that, and then also a follow up for that, Mr. Chalmers. The last time that the department has actually done an analysis or updated those policies and practices as well.
Yes, we'll do.
Thank you. I want to ask some questions about grass cutting. And I guess this is
Mr.
for
President, I believe all the agencies have a presentation on that. Do we want to let them
sure.
run through?
Yes.
Okay, should we, colleagues, does anyone else have questions on street sweeping?
Yeah,
I'd like to just say that.
Councilwoman, you got to use the microphone. You know this. I'm going to go to.
I would just like to say that in my district, I'm talking about the posted, I'm talking about what we're talking about here tonight. We thank you. It works, and it's dependable, and people talk positively about it. They don't even complain about moving their cars.
Thank
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there water coming in up there?
Yeah, they own it.
Okay. All right. We're going to go to, too bad you're not at DGS anymore, Director Sharkey. Very relaxed. Don't worry, you've got your work cut out for you at DOT. We'll get you later. We're going to go to Councilman Pinkett, and we're going to wrap up the street sweeping portion, and then we'll move on to the other half. Councilman Pinkett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I know we talked a lot about lessons learned and how we'll make improvements in phase 2, but I do want to just comment about 2 other concerns in the initial rollout related to the start time and the window of where people can't park, as to allow for the street sweeping. In some neighborhoods, the start time is as early as 7 a.m. And in some blocks, the window where somebody can't park can be almost 4 hours. How are those things being changed? And will there be some adjustments made in the initial phase where we go back? I mean, is it reasonable for residential communities to have street sweeping start at 7 a.m. and or for residents to have a 4-hour window where they can't park on their street?
So again, I apologize for not putting that in the presentation as part of lessons learned.
Mm-hmm.
We heard the outcry, the calls came in. Folks were very unhappy about that. Some of the issues were, they got to get the kids up and get out to school and so forth. So took a look at that, and we made a change. Instead of 7 a.m., we moved that time up to 8 a.m. So anyone with a 7 a.m. start time for mechanical street sweeping, they can just put in a 311 request, and we'll make the adjustment. We do understand that was, again, a big inconvenience, along with all of the other things that happened in this rollout of phase 1.
Okay. Thank you. I think this might be a question for Kim, related to the stormwater utility fund, and it looks like there's about almost $31 million in that particular fund, and I know Councilman Reisinger asked questions related to that. I'm still not clear about how all of that money is being utilized when this particular program is like $5 million. So I'd like to hear more about what are the other expenses that are being funded through that $31 million, and are we using $31 million annually? Are there activities that are using $31 million annually? And then along with that, it seems as though the mandate from the state called for, it says the MS4 permit requires that the city to proactively address the impact of stormwater runoff from 20% of city surfaces. How are we meeting, what is being required of us from the state?
So I'm going to answer your first question,
Okay.
trying to go off of my memory, but I will let you know that we do provide a report to the state in our MS4 annual report each year that specifically shows the uses of the stormwater fund.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have a separate report that talks about specifically how we're using any kind of funding to address the MS4 requirements. So yes, street sweeping counts for about $5 million per year, and then the operations that are also listed in Service 674 are used, and it makes up about, and again, it's my memory, somewhere between $15 to $17 million per year in operations. The remaining portion using, and $31 million per year is a little bit high. We've averaged more about $28 to $29 million per year since the beginning of the fee. That's been going towards capital funds. And for the capital, we had a demand of almost $98 million just for MS4 projects. That's not including the other projects that were listed in Program 520. So if you look at the capital improvement budgets for programs 520 and 525, you'll see how the Stormwater Fund has been used. And it's either been used as pay-go, or we had to build up so much reserve so that would allow us to be able to get certain debt service like the new utility revenue bonds that were being issued this year, as well as being attractive to other debt service mechanisms such as the environmental impact bonds. And again, all of this data is actually specifically laid out in any of our annual reports. In addition to all of that, we have to demonstrate that we were financially able to still be able to meet any of our regulatory requirements, and that's included in financial assurance plans, and we just did that one. It's every 2 years, so the last one for fiscal year 18 was included in our annual report, and all of those documents are available online on DPW's website. So that's your first question.
Yes.
And also the signs that that Mr. Chalmers has been talking about, those were funded by the stormwater utility under the capital program under program 525.
Okay.
So to answer your second question, the current permit, which was issued in December of 2013, had a requirement for restoration of 20% of the existing untreated impervious area. That was about 4,291 acres to be treated in 5 years. Prior to the beginning of the stormwater fee capital program, we did maybe 1 to 2 projects per year for stormwater restoration. Suddenly we were going to be tasked for doing multiple. So we came up with a multi-pronged approach of having both capital projects, operational programs, and then also partnerships with both the development community and the volunteer community. I will note that we were able to meet our 20% restoration requirement primarily due to the street sweeping. Street sweeping accounted for almost 3,800 acres that we were able to see. And to come back to Council President Scott's talk about the testing, I know it's distracting up there, isn't it? On whether or not we've done pre and post testing. For almost 20 years now, since the mid-1990s, we have had stream impact sampling being done in our streams on a monthly basis, looking at nutrients, sediment, and other water quality indicators.
Thank you.
The results of those are included in our annual reports. In this last annual report, we actually looked at the nutrients as well, and what we noticed was a significant decrease that happened around the same time that we systematically did the expansion for street sweeping. It happened around fiscal year 2014. We saw a nosedive come down on the nutrients. So it's not going to necessarily be a specific thing where it says, yes, this route made this kind of difference. What we are seeing is a trend in the right direction, that our water quality is improving, and I think that programs like street sweeping have been a large part of that. So, did that answer your question?
It did.
Right.
And Mr. Chair, my last question is for budget, because we were talking about technology enhancements for DPW. And so it only took me like 5 minutes to find out that Route Smart's been in existence for like 25, 30 years, and that DC's government's been using it since 2006 for the same reasons that we're now using it. So at what point does budget or any other agency make certain that agencies across city government are more efficient with our resources and make certain that they implement technology in a timely fashion? I mean, you know, that took me 5 minutes to find a case study of a government down the street that's already implemented, you know, this software.
We rely on agencies to inform on the variety of operational needs they have during the budget process, whether it's through their budget proposal, through enhancement requests, through requests for additional funding above their baseline, or using the innovation fund to make technology improvements. For example, the health department several years ago replaced a paper system for environmental sanitation fines with handheld devices through the innovation fund that they were able to pay back by eliminating one sanitation inspection position paid back. So we largely rely on agencies to inform there through a variety of processes. I know in our office we're in the process of establishing a new dedicated position for the Innovation Fund to do some of that business process management alongside agencies to assess their needs for things like technology or other improvements that would increase either efficiency or effectiveness.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree. I just think even beyond the Innovation Fund, we need to be proactively looking at agencies, and if they're either don't have the capacity or need assistance, we should be helping them to identify these resources so that they can operate more efficiently, and not just while the burden should be on the individual agencies, if need be, we should be able to step in and say, no, well, we've assisted and identified and helped you to identify technology that can help you be more efficient so that we are being better stewards of our limited resources.
Also, our team is eager to engage in those conversations. We've been in a number of work groups that DPW has been holding the past year around vacant property management, around recycling, around other places where they are taking a deeper dive, and we are eager to partner with CityStat as well, especially the new team that's on board, to look at improvements in accountability and ways we can partner to make sure that we're getting agencies what they need to operate efficiently and effectively.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Councilman, there's a stormwater remediation oversight committee, which I've been chairing for the last 2.5 years. We're looking to have that committee present to this committee with recommendations for DPW, how to make more effective use of the stormwater enterprise utility fund. We've been working with DPW on that. I'll be working very closely with Council President Scott to figure out an appropriate time to present the committee's findings. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of high priority issues in the city over the past couple months, but we're looking at sometime in the fall. So with that, we're going to get into presentations for the second hearing. We're going to let Sustainability go first. Is that correct, Jeff? Sustainability Commission.
So thank you, Chairman.
Matt's got, hang
so
on one
we
second.
just have a, no, we don't have a presentation. We just had a bill response to the street sweeping bill. So had just, we have nothing to add beyond that, but appreciate the efforts to improve the water quality in the city.
You guys are excused. Thank you. Matt, who's up first? DPW, Mr. Chalmers.
So good evening again, Council Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to come in this evening.
Missed it, the mic.
Sorry. Yeah, I understand. Thank you for the opportunity again to come in and present the Bureau of Solid Waste. So a quick overview of the Bureau. The Bureau is responsible for cleaning, right-of-ways, collecting and disposing of mixed refuse and recyclables generated by residents and visitors, boarding vacant and nuisance properties, cleaning and mowing vacant lots and nuisance private properties, abating rat population, and more. These are vital services that contribute to the public health, safety, economic development, and overall quality of life for Baltimore City. The Bureau of Solid Waste recent initiatives. In the last few years, we have accomplished several new initiatives and are in the midst of implementing additional new initiatives. Listed here are some of these initiatives which are helping move the needle forward on proactively cleaning of the city. So this is the service request process. This chart shows the process the Bureau uses to address service requests related to alley cleaning, grass cutting, and boarding. Street and alley cleaning. This slide shows the process for a dirty alley SR. These complaints can range from loose litter to bags of trash to dumping. It is a request entered as illegal dumping. It first goes to HCD to inspect and look for evidence to identify the offender. Technically, any trash dump where it should not be is considered illegal dumping. Cleaning and boarding. The service request involves private property required the due process for HCD to inspect and issue citations. It is the property owner's responsibility to keep their property clean, cut, and closed to casual entry. Per city code, the property owner is responsible for maintaining the sidewalks abutting the property clear of litter and weeds. If an issue is on private property and not addressed by the owner, HCD will investigate and issue a citation or notice as appropriate. The operational strategy for this is to address the oldest SR first. Cleaning and mowing private properties. The Bureau of Solid Waste cleaning and mowing services to the mayor and city council owned vacant lots and any HCD code enforcement referrals for nuisance or vacant private lots and properties. Before a private property may be referred for city mowing services, the Department of Housing and Community Development determines whether the property is vacant and then follows a code-required process of citing for high grass and weeds violations and providing a remedy period before the city may step in and resolve the issue. Mowing of private properties is contracted out. We currently have 2 private companies and Living Classroom which assign work orders. This chart shows the process for addressing the private lots. Cleaning and mowing mayor and city council owned lots. Traditionally, solid waste crews reactively responded to the high grass and weed SRs for both mayor and city council properties and privately owned vacant lots. This reactive approach made it difficult for DPW to strategically approach the high grass and weed SRs. Last summer, DPW implemented a ProMow, the proactive mowing of mayor and city council lots, on a 28-day cycle. City-owned lots are the city's responsibility to maintain and set an example. We now proactively mow these lots, reducing complaints about them. The lots were merged into stops using a grouping analysis, which has allowed DPW to have a system of greater efficiency to manage the vacant lots, which it is with its limited resources. At the time, 5,788 separate locations were merged into 2,842 stops. Mayor and City Council properties are assigned a reoccurring work order in City Works and are mowed by solid waste crews, which are assigned to the 4 different quadrants. They have access to riding mowers, bush cutters, tractors, and weed whackers. Electronic devices are being phased in so that routes can be accessed remotely and photographs can be uploaded in real time. The Violence Reduction Initiative. Solid Waste is providing expedited response times for service requests, including cleaning and boarding and vacant properties, cleaning of dirty streets and alleys, cutting high grass and weeds, proactive rat abatement services, and graffiti removal of gang-related tagging. 79,380 service requests closed in the VRI zone in fiscal year 19. 171,262 SRs were closed in the VRI zone since the inception of the program in November 2017. The expedited response time required in the VRI is taking a toll on response times in other parts of the city. We have been struggling to keep up. So some of the challenges: vacancies and FMLA impact operations daily. We have 50 vacancies. Routes running until 10 p.m. due to CDL shortage. Crews and drivers are being pulled from other services to handle collection routes, your curbside collection and your daily recycling. Challenge with properties that need to be reboarded often. Repeat properties is a challenge. Screwing boards instead of nailing boards as part of the stepped up program when there's a nuisance property that presents a health and welfare problem to the community, we use that process. Egregious, illegal dumping takes a lot of our time and effort for crews to clean. Cultural change is needed. Northwest Transfer Station closure led to overtime because trucks were not able to use the transfer station as usual and had to travel further and wait longer to empty their trucks. Without a second transfer station, we are very reliant on the use of the Northwest Transfer Station. Growing small haulers program at the Northwest Transfer Station is a success story, but it is leading to operational issues at the transfer station due to the limited space for our vehicles and the private vehicles to queue and move around in a tight area. Illegal dumping. The 311 service request category of illegal dumping captures only a portion of illegal dumping occurrences. There are several SR categories that may involve some degree of illegal dumping, including sanitation, corny can collection, property management, cleaning, bag pickup, dirty alley, dirty street, illegal dumping, park cleaning, waterway cleaning, and SIU cleanups. In fiscal year 18, there were 44,571 SRs across the 6 services requested categories related to illegal dumping. DPW writes an annual report on the city's effort to remediate illegal dumping, which is available on our website. While proactive cleaning, education, and communication are key to clean city, enforcement is needed where the efforts fail. The investigation of illegal dumping requires a coordination between the Bureau of Solid Waste and DHCD. The Bureau of Solid Waste continues to work with DHCD to identify new hotspot locations for enhanced sanitation enforcement. Success stories. Despite the challenges, we are making progress in several areas. We utilize technology and partnership to be more proactive and innovative. We thank you for the opportunity to present on this important topic and are prepared to discuss and answer your questions.
Thank you. Who's next? DGS.
Good afternoon, Council President, Committee Chair, and Council members. Thank you for this opportunity to come and present about the role that DGS plays in these 3 activities for the City of Baltimore. I am Chichi Niaga Nash, the Acting Director of the Department of General Services. And with me here today, in case we have any detailed questions that need answering, I have Ryan Trout, our Legislative Officer, Hillary Chester, our real estate agent, who's also responsible for surplus schools and getting those into the city's inventory, and Mr. Terrell Chesson, who has just come back from upstairs dealing with the leaking sound that we were hearing while the storm was going on. So thank you for that. So General Services' mission is to deliver cost-effective, high-quality, reliable, and most important of all, sustainable service to our customers being the other city agencies that provide services to the residents of this city. When it comes to grass cutting, that's no different. We approach it with a steadfast commitment to doing so in a timely and with a focus on quality service provision. Boarding of properties. The role that DGS plays in the boarding of properties is very limited and is broken down into 2 categories. So while we are responsible for the management and maintenance of city buildings, our core buildings of 45 internal service funded buildings are what we focus most on. The internal service funded buildings are those for which we have leases or some sort of agreement with other agencies. We charge them rent on a per square footage basis in exchange for the space and the provision of certain services, such as trash collection, maintenance of their outside spaces. In determining when properties need to be boarded up, there are three key factors that prompt us to do so. It is safety and security. So if we are aware that, for instance, we get possession of a surplus school And we know that if we do not take certain steps to secure that school, it is likely to either become resident for a vagrant population or to be pilfered for the copper or for any other materials in the building. Then we will proactively board that property for safety and security purposes. In case of emergency preparedness, so if we are aware of a major storm coming in or any other inclement weather, if steps need to be taken to sandbag or to board buildings, that is another way in which we become aware of it and get involved. So I touched on this. Most of our boarding is driven by either constituent complaints or complaints by our customer agencies. In some cases, it is driven by our tenants in those buildings. So not all our tenants are customer agencies. We also have some nonprofits that occupy space in previously surplus buildings. Or upon recommendation from our personnel who are out there servicing these buildings. So if they see something, they will proactively take the measures to address it before it reaches a point where we need to respond to complaints. For grass cutting, we take advantage of a master blanket purchase order, and the grass cutting in most of the facilities, predominantly the 45 internal service properties, is done on a 14-day, on a biweekly schedule. This is performed through the grass cutting season, which is early April to late October. In addition to Garrison, who is our main contractor for the provision of this service, we also recently started working with ROCA to address some of the facilities. So we've put them on a schedule. ROCA is a program, is an organization that is designed to redirect extremely high-risk young men, as identified by the law enforcement community, redirect them from the streets and into a more positive life through cognitive behavioral therapy and other interventions and group encouraging them to participate in group efforts such as putting them on work crews. We do not do much in the realm of alley cleanup. It's not within the purview of the services that we provide. If we do have a tenant who identifies that in their space or adjacent to their space there is alley dumping going on, then we inform them that it's their responsibility to either dispose of it, or we will contact our sister agency DPW and put in a service request so that they can follow the process that's already in place to address that. And that is the role that DGS plays in these three functions. I welcome any questions that the committee may have.
We'll come back. Thank you, and congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
Director Sharkey, congratulations on your appointment as well.
Steve Sharkey, DOT. Want to thank the whole council, council president, council chair, as well as the other council members here, as well as the associated staff. Just going to give a brief overview of what DOT does in terms of grass mowing. So we will kick it off. Great. So first piece is grass cutting and cleaning the right-of-way. So we have department maintenance of grass, step-by-step overview of 301 process, trash and debris located within the medians and right-of-way. So the next question is, what happens when a citizen calls 311 for grass cutting services? So citizens call 311 for overgrown grass. The 311 call center confirms the location and assigns to the appropriate agency. DOT maintenance conducts site assessment within 72 hours if the SR was assigned to us. The site assessment confirms if the grass cutting order is needed, and then grass cutting orders are closed within 28 days, weather permitting. But that's what you'll see most of, though, is actually probably our medians. So So we are responsible for maintaining the city right-of-way. We utilize a contractor for mowing the grass and medians and city right-of-way. Additionally, the contractor provides edging, trimming, and trash cleanup services prior to cutting for every 14 days. So we have 14-day cycle, which is about approximately 16 per year. April 1st through November 30th is when the season is. So we're also tasked with keeping these areas clear and clean of trash, litter, and debris. Outside of the mowing season and during rainy weather, maintenance division supervisors proactively inspect medians and right-of-way for trash, litter, and debris. Trash, litter, and debris is picked up by the maintenance division during the winter time, so to speak. And bulk items and illegal dumping are the responsibility of DPW. Just also want to mention kudos to the ROCA program. They were an excellent addition at DGS, and I'm interested in expanding or making a partnership with them as well when I get further down the line in DOT for some sort of programs. So they are actually really awesome to work with, and if you ever get to meet with the ROCA employees, they're very always extremely cordial, friendly, polite, and they are working. So just recommend you see them working one day.
HCD.
Make sure I have the right button. Good evening, Council President Scott, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. Thank you for this opportunity to present. My name is Jason Hessler. I'm Deputy Commissioner for Permits and Litigation at Baltimore City Department of Housing. Commissioner Braverman could not be here this evening. He sends his apologies, but he is sitting on a panel for affordable housing, or at least at some point he was. We broke out the Department of Housing's role in keeping the city clean into really three categories: residential, sanitation, dumping, and then the cleaning and boarding of properties. So the city cites property owners, owner-occupied properties for sanitation violations. We respond to approximately 30,000 service requests a year and issue citations where there's a live body that really should be handling the sanitation issues at that property. That's putting the trash out on the right day, putting it out in a can, cutting their grass, picking up after their pets, all of those type of real property sanitation related issues. So we issue 23,000 citations a year related to property owners, tenants that are not properly following the sanitation rules in Baltimore City. The majority of these come in as proactive inspector-initiated activities because we're doing re-inspections on open notices, as well as patrolling areas where we know there are problems, high trash issues, so to speak. That's about 84% of what we do is proactive. The rest come in either through the mayor's office, council president's office, council members, or 311. With illegal dumping, our special investigations unit is tasked with dealing with illegal dumping. We have cameras throughout the city. When we catch somebody on camera dumping and we can identify them and have the facts, then we prosecute them criminally in this district court of Maryland. Here's a map of where our cameras are dispersed. We pretty much hit every council district with at least one camera, but districts, I think it's 9 and 10, carry the bulk of the cameras, and that's where we see the most illegal dumping, which is, when I talk about illegal dumping, I'm talking about somebody coming into a dead end, a back alley behind vacant buildings, and bringing stuff from kind of outside the neighborhood into the neighborhood, opposed to those residential trash issues of tenants putting it out wrong or owners putting it out wrong or piling it up on the corners. So that's our illegal dumping. And then for cleaning and boarding, like I mentioned earlier, for cleaning and boarding, 84% of properties in Baltimore City are owner occupied. So we're really only dealing with 15% of the properties that are vacant and abandoned and need to be cleaned or cut, potentially cleaned or cut or boarded by the city. For the properties that are privately owned, citations are used, and that's where those 23,000 citations come in to work on adjusting behavior and modifying it to comply. But there are vacant and abandoned properties where the city just needs to get out there and clean or cut. Our enforcement there is not generally by citation, but rather by violation notice. So when we are aware of a property that is either a vacant building or a vacant lot that has trash or high grass and weeds, we get a notice on that property. That notice is a notice and an order to the property owner to clean the property, secure the property, cut the grass, keep it clean. It also puts them on notice that if they don't do that, the city has the authority to come onto the property and take those actions at their cost. So this is what gives the city the authority, and my friends at Public Works the authority, to enter onto the property and cut it, clean it, or board it. The vast majority of properties have existing notices on it. A number of years ago, we worked with the council to change the code so that if the city is the one doing the cutting or cleaning on a vacant lot, that notice does not have to be abated. We only abate an exterior notice on a vacant lot if the owner calls us and says that they did it, and then we confirm it. Otherwise, we leave those notices open so that we continue to have the authority to go and cut and clean the property without having to wait for that notice to be issued, expire, and then create a work order for our friends at DPW to go cut it. So we've working with the council, identified ways to streamline the process and get to the cutting and cleaning of properties as efficiently as possible. And of course, the majority of vacant buildings, we have over 16,000 vacant buildings in the city. Not all of those need to be cut and cleaned. About 50% of them do. Those are the ones that are either owned by the city, or it's about 2,500 that are owned by the city, and then the balance that are truly abandoned. The owners are deceased, corporations are defunct, or just people have walked away from them and will not be cutting or cleaning them, and it's left to the city to get it done in order to have a clean city. For those properties, our housing inspectors regularly inspect those properties. They also patrol the areas, and if they see a property that needs to be cleaned or cut, they create a work order in our internal system for Public Works to go out and cut or clean that property or board that property. That's put into the system. It's transferred over to Public Works automatically. When they complete the work, they upload photos showing before and after. They enter in the cost. They close out the work order. And that information is dropped into our friends at Department of Finance for them to generate a bill and lien the property. This is work that is all done automatically with data drops. Back when I started with the city, these were pieces of paper, and there was a tractor trailer full of documents in a parking lot at Public Works of all of these bills and photos and everything else that were there to help substantiate the liens. And all of this is now digital, and we can review any kind of complaints and see the before and after photos and be able to address that with the constituent at any time. So the 83% of our cleaning and boarding work orders, as I mentioned, are proactively created by the inspectors. The other percentage is either through 311, which on average we close those out within 3 to 4 days. That entails the inspection and the creating of notices. Our service guarantee on those is 15 days, but our average for the last 12 years has been 3 to 4 days of closing out SRs. And I mentioned we do 30,000 sanitation SRs plus another 40,000 other housing-related SRs a year. And then, of course, we're in the VRI zones, patrolling those, creating work orders, issuing notices and citations, and then responding to any other complaints that come in. Some proactive efforts, besides the housing inspectors out there proactively looking for dirty lots, dirty buildings, open buildings, things that need to be picked up and putting in those work orders. We have the cameras in known dumping spots. We contribute 1.5 million of CDBG funds to the Department of Public Works for their cleaning efforts. Our systems are set up to try and reduce the number of cleanings that are needed. So if a property owner registers their property, as they are required to do if it's a non-owner occupied property, and we create a work order to go cut, clean, or board that property, our system, without any human intervention, will automatically generate an email to that registered property owner letting them know that the city has identified a problem at their property, a cleaning, cutting, or boarding that's needed, and alerting them basically, go do it, beat us to it, and let us know, or else we're going to do it and we're going to lien you. And so that was implemented really at the behest of property owners and property managers who were saying that you're killing us with these liens. And we were saying that, well, you're killing us with not taking care of your properties. Let's see how we can work together. So in many cases, we will send these emails out. They will get them. They will send their maintenance crew out. Once they're done, they will respond back to General Superintendent Nakabosi and his team, who's here in the back, and let them know that the work was done, send in a photo showing it. We can match it up with our photos that our inspectors take, and then we can cancel that work order before a crew is even dispatched. In the really good years, sometimes we beat them, but most of the time they can do it, and then it saves a work order that the crew has to do. Landlord-tenant education. This is really in two forms. One, working with the council years ago, we changed the code so that where in single-family houses that are rental, the tenant's generally responsible for maintaining the sanitation at the property. But we know that citations issued to tenants aren't the most effective tools. So whenever we issue a citation to a tenant or a notice to a tenant, a letter goes out to the owner of the property alerting them that this has happened. And an owner becomes responsible for the tenant's sanitation behaviors if we've issued 2 citations for the same thing in a 12-month period. So if we cite them twice in a 12-month period for not putting their trash out properly, the 3rd citation goes to the owner and becomes a lien on the property. That puts the burden on the property owners to make sure that their tenants have enough trash cans, their tenants know what day their trash goes out, when their recycling goes out, where to put it, how to pick up after their dog, and where to keep their trash, and all those sanitation things. Most recently, with the council's help, we passed the rental licensing law. Part of the rental licensing law requires that all owners provide a sanitation guide to the property owners. And on our website, the owner can download an example of a sanitation guide. It's a very basic, simple thing that says, your trash day is blank. Your recycling day is blank. All trash must be stored in a can with a tight-fitting lid. Place your trash out 6 p.m. the night before, bring the can back in. Bulk items can be reported to 311 for removal on a schedule. So it's got all those basic things that in some cases, believe it or not, when we would confront people, tenants particularly, about their disposal behaviors, they would say, what am I supposed to do? And we once caught a person that dropped a bag of trash over an overpass, and we followed him back to his house and we confronted him, and his mom came out, and he was an adult, but his mom came out and started yelling at our investigators, like, what are we supposed to do? Where are we supposed to put our trash? And at the time it was, city picks up trash twice a week, and we have drop-off centers, and we have bulk trash, but you're not supposed to go drop it on the train tracks. And they got a $500 citation. And then we have, we attempt to, if a resident leaves a phone number or email address, we attempt to contact the resident on their 311 complaints to let them know what's happened. Or if they check off a box, we mail them a postcard that lets them know that we've inspected the site and what to expect next. And then finally, a proactive thing is that we have an apprentice program where we are bringing people from Baltimore City young people that are looking for jobs and training them to be housing inspectors. And so it's great to have people that are from Baltimore being able to reach out to the communities and, you know, talk to the members and say, like, look, this is the way you store your trash, and, you know, this is what you do when you get a citation. So those are the 3 areas where the Department of Housing supports a clean city, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Rec and Parks?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jenny Morgan. We didn't prepare a formal report. We're really just going to address grass cutting, and it's more of a service update. In the years leading up to this, we've done similarly to DOT a 16-cycle cut for the first half of the year. We were doing a 10-day cycle, and at July 1st, we would switch to a 14. Under the leadership of Director Moore, we've just changed that. So as of July 1st, we're cutting every week. Lorenz is our contractor, as is with DOT, and there's already it's a pretty big difference that you can see. They've been doing Middle Branch since last year, and the quality of service has improved. They're really trying to double down on their edging and their trimming, so we're just trying to do better and make it look better. So,
thank you. Does every agency use Lorenz? Or Mike, or Steve, you could sit. Yeah, you just.
So Lorenz, these are all publicly bid contracts, and Lorenz has kind of been the big boy in the field, so to speak, for a number of years. So they're usually the low bidder for many years. There's other people that sometimes will come in and win contracts, but it's frequently Lorenz. And
they definitely have DOT and BCRP. This is our last year. I think we rebid again for the following year.
And they might also, in the past, they've had schools as well. So just to mention that probably the second most grass in the city is schools.
They don't have schools anymore.
They don't? Okay.
No.
So who provides contract oversight over Lorenz?
The park district managers.
What about for DOT?
I believe it's maintenance supervisors and inspectors.
Superintendent and their supervisors.
Okay. Does anyone else use Lorenz? DGS?
My apologies. I was just getting clarification from the division chief. Our supervisors have oversight over the performance of the contractor.
Okay.
And in our case, it is Garrison. We don't use Lorenz.
Okay. Is there, I mean, this is a conversation that's continued for a number of years. We have all the right people in the room, and you all are very intelligent and capable folks. Is there a reason why we don't have one contract for the entire city for grass cutting?
It's a conversation. It's a conversation that's happened a number of times. I do know that.
It has came up in previous administrations, meeting agency directors, but I think the consensus was on a couple of occasions that certain agencies need grass cut in a certain manner or way. Just for example, say Rec and Parks / ball fields, I think at one time may have been doing it. It needed to be done on certain times, cut a certain height, that kind of thing. I know that for us, it's always just a general 4 inches height, pick up trash prior to edging, trimming.
Your frequency is different.
And then, yes, our frequency is a little different than Rec and Parks, but they recently just adjusted theirs, as Jenny just said, as far as that's concerned. I know solid waste did used to use them at one point in time to help them clean up a lot of vacant properties, but I think that was a little bit cumbersome for them, and I don't want to speak for solid waste, just internal knowledge that I know about.
So for solid waste, ours is bidded out based on cleaning and cutting 3 different categories. Category 1 being, small, minor trash removal and cutting, and category 3 being more egregious with bulk items that need to be removed. So I think it's bidded out differently because ours is cleaning and cutting.
Did you bid it down?
I guess I understand every agency has different needs. I don't understand why it can't all be under one contract vehicle. Seems like it'd be cheaper for the city. We'd save money. And we would have one entity that any agency could call.
I think it's worthwhile sitting down, discussing, trying to figure out how to move forward.
Find a company big enough.
Dovetail off of.
Yeah, so, so I guess we're looking at the mayor's office here to convene this because we don't really have the ability on the council to convene it outside of legislating and requiring that one agency take the lead, but that doesn't really fix our issue here, because if DOT is the lead, I don't know that we want to bog Steve and his team and Kenny and their team down with how often Director Moore wants parks cut, or if John's got a situation where he's got a vacant property and he's got mattresses all over it that are hiding in 3-foot weeds. No fault to John, but those are the types of conditions his team is dealing with, versus I'm assuming you all do the War Memorial area or around government buildings. So if I'm off base here, if anyone feels like what I'm saying doesn't make sense, I'm not going to take offense. Please tell me.
So I would say that I believe that there are opportunities for some parts to go into the mega contract, but I believe that some parts would probably be best handled by separate contracts, in my opinion. So I believe probably DGS's work and a lot of John's work, but there could be a consideration for a larger contract for things that are proactively mowed together. It did work. So this is going back to 2004. Rex and Parks' contract was tied with schools, and it did produce a lot of savings for school system and did improve their service. But then maybe however many years ago, they separated out because they just did. I'm not sure why. So schools went back on their own.
May I just say that,
Please use the microphone if you're going to say it.
well, first of all, I don't know where you would find a company large enough to do that. And secondly, we talk all the time about local and minority businesses, and there aren't a whole lot of opportunities out here when somebody wants to build a high-rise on a block. But when it comes to this kind of work, there should be local, there should be minority, there should be contractors that we could hire, that would bid, that live here and that employ here, and so there really aren't that many opportunities for small contracts to be able to break them down and make them still affordable for the city. But I would imagine this would be one. The lawn care, cutting the grass, picking up the trash while you're doing it, and all that, break it down makes more sense for our economy here in Baltimore City, I think. But I've never really thought about that particular issue before, so I stand to be debated, but that's my first take on it. Let's make it local and give it out, bid it out to people who work and live here.
Mr. Chair, and I think, yes, and 1 second. With a mega contract or whatever we want to call it, there are portions of that could be subbed out to local and MBE and WBE for some of the more specialized.
They want to be contractors. They don't want to spend their lives with the SUB in front of their name. People with businesses in this city, they want to be contracted with the
Can you use them? Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So I appreciate the conversation we've had so far, and I think this is a worthwhile one that we've got the right people in the room right now. I don't know if this is the right context to hammer out all the potential details of what this might look moving forward. I'm happy to convene this group sometime in the next 2 weeks to sort of talk through a cost-benefit analysis of what this might look like.
Yeah. Why don't we start there, a cost-benefit analysis? That seems to make the most sense. Councilman Pinkett, then Council President
and
Scott.
since we mentioned Lorenz, so would Lorenz be responsible for President Street?
I'm sorry?
Would Lorenz be responsible for President Street? No, I mean, as the contractor for the median.
President Street, the entire stretch of President Street?
I mean, when I looked at their website, they had photographs of President Street, so I assumed that they
I
were.
believe there is portions
And
of
so
it.
would Lorenz be responsible for North Avenue?
North Avenue, West North Avenue, or East North Avenue?
Okay, west.
West North Avenue, yes, they are responsible for some of the medians on West North Avenue.
So do we get a discount for North Avenue? Meaning, because they don't provide the same service on West North Avenue that they provide on President Street. Like, they don't pick up the trash, the edging is rarely done. The quality of the cut is not the same. So, like, is it the same contract, or is there different contracts for different medians?
No.
Because it seems like it is. It seems like there's one level of service in certain sections and then another level, and that's disturbing if it's the same contract. I mean, it's disturbing regardless, but especially if it's the same contractor. We should be getting the same kind of quality of service, whether it be West North Avenue or whether it be downtown, and I don't see it.
That's not our experience with parks.
Well, it's definitely my experience in the 7th District.
Mr. President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, before I ask my questions, I just want to point out that the point that Councilman Pinkett just made is one that rings very true in places throughout the city, especially hearing that this one contractor has a significant amount of the contracts throughout the agencies. When you travel, President Street and North Avenue is an example, President Street and Wabash Avenue and Northwestern is another example. President Street and the median on Harford Road is another example where we consistently hear from citizens that, well, they don't edge our stuff. They don't pick up the trash first. They don't do that first here, but we can see it happen in other cities. And what I just hope that collectively we're doing is making sure that we're building in systems of accountability so that every citizen and everyone who lives in Baltimore, no matter where they live, gets the same kind of grass cutting service. So a question for all the agencies, and feel free to use your metric that your agency measures. Couple questions that I'll ask in order. How many square feet per year is your agency responsible for cutting? How much does your agency spend on grass cutting, including personnel, equipment, and disposal of collected waste? And that's a question for everyone.
I can go, I know. So we contract out 2,924 acres, plus or minus a couple.
Say, Ms. Morgan, could you
2,920
slow down just a little bit? We're trying to keep notes.
2,924,
Mr.
plus or
President,
minus.
I don't know why I know this odd statistic, but 640 acres equals a square mile. I think I saw it on Jeopardy when Mr. Ambrose was on the show.
For those who don't know, Mr. Ambrose from the mayor's office was once a superstar brainiac on Jeopardy. Continue, ma'am.
And I forgot the other part. The other part? Oh,
The
the cost.
The cost, including personnel, equipment, and disposal of collected waste.
Yeah. So I think we had budgeted last year $800,000. I don't know what the new contract is with the weekly. I texted a couple of people while I was sitting here to try to get that number, and nobody had it.
And what about does
I
that?
can get it to you, though.
Yeah, and please provide what you don't have, including a breakdown for every agency. So if you don't have this, know that we want a breakdown that includes the breakdown of personnel, equipment, and disposal of that waste. And the second thing, a follow up, Ms. Morgan, is this just for your contract or in-house too?
It's just for the contractor.
So I want total.
Yeah, there's the only properties that aren't on that mowing list are acquisitions since that contract went into place. So it's pretty small, but I'll
Okay.
include that as well.
Thank you. DOT, Mr. Chang?
I don't have those numbers like she has, but I will have to get back to you and supply you with that information contractual-wise and city personnel and equipment-wise.
Thank you. If everyone who doesn't have it can provide it to Chairman Costello by the 31st, that would be greatly appreciated.
One thing to note, though, DOT is not going to be able to provide it in acres.
No, it doesn't matter. However your agency measures it is quite okay, Mr.
All right, thank you.
DPW?
So yeah, we don't track it in square footage or acres. The budget for the property maintenance portion of the budget is $12.6 million. We also have 2 contractors, Living Classroom and P2 Cleaning. I'll provide that total cost for you. And we also have P2 Cleaning, Living Classroom, Evergreen. Thank you, Evergreen. So I'll provide that information to you. Thank you.
And the follow-up for you, Mr. Chalmers. So you guys don't measure at all how much grass you're cutting? You just do it in amount of lots or properties that you maintain?
It's based on properties and service requests generated. So to answer your question, we don't do it. We don't take into account the acreage that we're managing on that.
So this is for finance and for the mayor's office, I think that we have to, in order to understand the totality of what the hard work that Mr. Chalmers folks and the folks that are doing those contracts do, I think that we have to have a measurable so we can see exactly how much grass they're cutting, right? Because nothing against him, I think Mr. Chalmers is great, but they could come back and tell you guys that they cut 4,000 lots, but 4,000 lots could be 4,000 lots of 0.2 acres, right? So I think that we have to know exactly how much we're cutting, much like the other agencies have been able to say that they have a measurable for how they're doing that. DGS? Oh, sir, you look like you were ready. Housing.
0 and 0.
Yes, sir. You got off easy. DGS?
We have the information based on number of lots and the acres of each of those lots, so we will put together that information and get it to you in a reasonable amount of time.
Thank you. And next thing is a follow-up. So for each of the departments, how does your department measure its effectiveness in the grass cutting? As we've seen in budget hearings, and the measures available in the budget books aren't always a complete picture of the agency's performance. So how do you measure the effectiveness of your each respective agencies and the contractors in grass cutting? Ms. Chalmers?
So we measure the effectiveness based on a service level agreement, which we have set for each, for property maintenance, which is a 30-day window turnaround to manage a lot or property cleaning. We also look at the quality. Each request or each property that we manage, there's a before and after photograph attached to that service request. So we look at the time it takes to manage that property, the amount of effort, and the overall result at the end.
Thank you. And Mr. Chalmers, the 30-day time window, what is that based in?
So it's based on the ability to us to get out there and manage the property based on the current resources that we have. And that's the SLA that was set.
And okay, I'll come back to that later.
Housing. We don't cut grass, but in measuring what the housing inspectors do and keeping the city clean, we have outcome-based budgeting measures that match up with this, our SR response time, but the main thing really is that we've divided up the city into sub-districts within our housing districts, and inspectors are assigned to those housing districts and are responsible for them. So it's very easy for a superintendent, a supervisor to go into an area and see that if there's a pile of trash there on Monday and it's still there on Wednesday and it hasn't been tagged by a housing inspector, there's a problem. And so Peter and his team and Chief Booker, they their mantra is to inspect what you expect and get out there and own your territory. And so that's really how it's measured.
And that they do. Recreation and Parks?
So now that we're on a weekly, every day, they're, Monday through Friday, they'll know the same number of properties they're going to get done. There's the chief of park maintenance, 3 park district managers, and 5 assistant park district managers, and part of their charge every day is to go through that list that have been done like the day previously to make sure that they're all up to standard.
And do you have a standard, like a measurable that you provide? Or it's just, is the park clean? Is the grass cut?
Pretty much a visual, and did they not cut trash? Did they trim properly? Did they blow grass here or there? And there's a response time. It's very quick.
And that will be different for ball fields, though, right? It will be
That's
if they're
different for
playable.
ball fields. We do cut the ball fields.
Yes. So, and actually, since we're on that, I know that the department, if anyone's looking for a job, is looking for someone.
We're hiring
Please tell them about that.
hiring a, what is it called? Turf manager. That's all. I know I wrote this back. A turf manager that's all sports fields related, and that's advertised right now, and I think it's open for another, maybe week or so. Thanks. And so we're hoping to really raise the level of service that we can provide our constituents by having the ball fields look great and having one person dedicated to that.
Thank you. DOT.
We measure our effectiveness based on the scope of work in the contract, visual field inspections, and in accordance with the actual schedule developed by the contractor and the agency, meaning DOT. That meaning also that it is looked at by 4 sectors of the city, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest. We also look into 311 Salesforce to actually see if there's actually any complaints that may come in related to any of those areas that are under the contractor's responsibility. The majority of the time, it's mainly after the work has been done, based on where someone may have placed some what we call illegal dumping out on the median and stuff like that. And so we generally just go ahead and schedule and get that picked up. But overall, that's how we track our effectiveness.
Chang, when you guys, for your inspections of the contractor's work, for example, to Councilman Pinkett's point earlier, let's just say you're out on North Avenue or Wabash in his district, and does your inspection include whether the median or whatever the property was edged, and are those things included in your inspection?
Yes, they try to identify as much as that as possible. There is a couple of medians that are really not under the contract. They're actually under a community agreement to take care of, especially in Councilman Pinkett's district, where he referenced on West North Avenue, which we explained to him before. But outside of that, it's not that many, and we feel as though we are getting the services required based on the contract.
Thank you. And can you provide that list to the chair too, the list of the medians that have to be maintained by community agreement?
Yes.
Thank you. DGS, and congratulations, ma'am.
Thank you very much. So we do not collect hard data points, so we're not collecting or analyzing data on the performance or effectiveness of grass cutting services. However, at our core buildings where there is a resident building maintenance supervisor on staff, they will go behind and inspect the work that's being done by our contractors. So in that case, it's just anecdotal feedback getting back to the superintendents and on up about the quality of the work being performed. We also try and hold the vendors self-accountable by making them complete field tickets, which is a sheet of paper that says who was out there, what work they did, what time they arrived, the date and time of the service provided. And then we have some preventative maintenance crews who go out and do routine checks. So we would have the ability to call out vendors on any claims they made off field tickets if we find contradictory evidence when we do our routine PMs. From my understanding, the only real repository of information about vendors is in CityBuy when we put in vendor reports if we have a concern.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that for you guys, because I know this is something that I've personally have dealt with over the years. feel like we have to have some measurables for you guys around this, because we often as a council get calls, for example, from police commanders or folks or fire battalion chiefs complaining about the grass not being cut or not being cut up to par at city buildings. I normally would call Director Sharkey, but now I'll be calling you for those kind of things, just to figure out, to make sure that we're putting something in place and making the relationships within the agencies.
Thank you. Noted. And just point of clarification, we are not responsible for the grass cutting at firehouses.
Okay, who's it? They have a contract too?
They manage their own grass cutting.
Well, there we go. Thank you. Are any of the agencies here familiar with Philly's land care model? HCD?
I'm familiar with it, but I would yield to Ms. Knox at planning, as she is the resident
Knox,
expert.
while you're coming up, and I have a couple other specific questions about that. So DPW, Rec and Parks, DOT, and DGS, you are not familiar with the program?
My team is a part of a working group. I can't give you the specifics, but they are a part of a working group that talked about the Philly Land Care project.
Thank you. So for the benefit of my colleagues and for the listening public, this model is used to take care of about 12,000 vacant lots, about 16 million square feet, consisting 30% of Philly's vacant land, and this program cost them $3.3 million to run. And they had a study done by UPenn of the Philly Land Care model that said that there is a return of investment of $5 for spent on vacant buildings and $26 on vacant lots. So, and it also may reduce gun violence in the areas as much as 39%. So I want to see who knew about this program, because clearly, as you know, I'm always looking to other cities, and it was my understanding that there was somewhere in city government where we piloted this model and wanted to see if that was true. Come on up, ma'am.
I know that the Rec and Parks Administration has just recently been on 2 trips to Philly, so, but above my pay grade went on that trip.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, please come up and identify yourself.
My name is Kim Knox. I'm the greening coordinator for the Baltimore Planning Department's Baltimore Green Network program, and I also act as the staff liaison for the neighborhood subcabinet Baltimore Green Network vacant lots. And we had the wonderful opportunity of going to Philadelphia, talking to Mr. Green, who is in charge of the program, as well as the city of Philadelphia. And of course, you are right, President Scott. The city of Philadelphia actually contracts with the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society for the last 24 years. What they do is they have 3 programs. One of the main one is that they contract with 12 to 15 local vendors, 70% of them being MBEs, and they give them specific lots to mow every 2 weeks, clean and mow. And then they also fence those lots in order to brand them. And you're correct, the value of the properties have gone up, anywhere from $22,000 in terms of the sale price, and an increase each year. It's maintained, near lots that are maintained, as well as a reduction of gun violence, which is, of course, in terms of 9%, and then that 29% in terms of vacant houses. The city does have a pilot project, 47 lots, 17 of them along Frederick Avenue, 29 along Pennsylvania Avenue. We have been working with ROCA on the Pennsylvania Avenue lots, and since April 15th, been working with Living Classrooms on the lots along Frederick Avenue. And so what we're looking at is how to do something similar in Philadelphia. But what they have found is with small local firms, not only are the lots clean, but they also tend to increase in skills and grow bigger, and they're more likely to hire local Philadelphia residents. The other program that they have is Philadelphia has a land bank program. So with their community development block grant, they train people just getting out of, go in jail, and then hire them for an apprenticeship of 9 months. And then if the vendors, there are 12 to 15 vendors, hire one or two of the trained reentry citizens, they get more lots to clean and mow as part of their main program. So it's a nice program that develops the community as well as the workforce of the city of Philadelphia.
Thank you.
I just want to.
Microphone, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm so glad you raised this because I would very much like our colleague distributed a lot of information about this because he's been doing research on the kind of programs that we could develop that would use local talent the way the Philadelphia one does. I would hope that that we could have a hearing on that Philadelphia program. It sounds great. It increases property values in the neighborhoods where it is. And they have a whole, it's just the way you describe, well, of course, you know what it's all about. I think it would be great to hear about it because one of the things I think a lot of us are interested in, and I know that Public Works is and Solid Waste, starting the idea of neighborhood self-help, not to substitute for what solid waste does, but to supplement it. And we're starting a project like that in Chum. And we're very excited about it. In other words, working with solid waste and working with the agencies to try to do local sanitation work that can't be done in general, but that neighbors could do, and we could eventually employ some people to do in a local neighborhood. And it's a good way to sustain things because if you're in the neighborhood working on sanitation issues where you already live, then you're not going to let it fall apart after it gets cleaned up or whatever. You're not just going to walk away and say, well, I did that today. You're going to want to keep things clean. You're going to want to keep things, the illegal dumping out. So it sustains itself. And that's what's happening up in Philadelphia. So if we could remember to try to bring Philadelphia to Baltimore, I think they'd have a wonderful time. I'm sure they'd be glad.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And I think that is something we should look at. And it seems to me that we had a successful pilot with this program, with the organizations that we're working with, and knowing that the Philadelphia land care model has a flat rate. Councilman Costello, the chair, was talking about having a flat contract throughout the city, but Councilman, this program has a flat rate where they pay 12 cents per foot to all of their contractors, no matter where it is, to deal with grass cutting in lots. But just want to know and say, especially to the administration, that we know that we have a problem when it comes to cleaning, boarding, all of these things, especially with our vacant lots. And we know that not much has changed in my time on earth, let alone my time in city government, about how we deal with that issue. And we have to, I know that there in the past, not from Mr. Chalmers, but in others in his position, they have been staunchly against some of the things that the land care model does, and that's like fencing that the councilwoman issued, doing those kind of things. And when we know that we're a city of Baltimore where we're going to have a lot of people, especially returning to our communities from prison, and that we have to, in order to prevent us from having this continuing disease of gun violence, have strangleholds on communities, we have to create opportunities. And I think that no one would argue that there is an abundance of opportunity in helping to keep Baltimore clean, and that in the same way, we can also do what we've been saying that we're going to do for a long time in city government, and that's building up small community-based businesses. So I think, Councilwoman, we will do that.
And they'll sustain themselves.
And the next thing I wanted to do, and this is a combination for DCHD and DPW, and I think I'll start with you, Mr. Chalmers. We constantly hear, and we don't know if it's true or not, that's why I'm going to ask you, that citizens, other folks, sometimes city employees will call and email or grab me on the street and say that there's a quota system for DPW cleaning crews. Is it true that this exists, or can we put that to bed for once and for all?
So there's not a quota. There's an expectation of getting a day's work, and that's based on what was done that day. So to give you an example, you may have a crew that can go out and do 20 locations, but that's based on what they encountered at those 20 locations. Mm-hmm. You may have a crew that goes out and do a half of a job because it was an enormous amount of work to do. So we are enforcing and making sure that folks give us a day's work, and we're tracking that through pictorial documentation, travel time, and various things that make sure we get a day's work. So to answer your questions, there's not a quota.
Thank you. And then the other thing that we hear, and this is not just for your side of not just for this particular thing in DPW and other places in city government, that I would like for you to address, is that sometimes we hear that if a crew goes out and completes all their work for the day, they can then in turn, go home or come back, even if they left early, to work overtime to do other work. How can you dismiss that rumor for us once and for all, too?
So there's only one operation within the Bureau that works under the task system, and that's curbside mixed refuse collection and recycling. That's the only operation, and across the industry, that's, you look in other cities, it's the same task system. The work that the route collection employees do is labor intense from the time they hit the street. We have 210,000 residents that we have to service Tuesday through Friday. So that equates to about 50,000 residents that we touch every single day. We have approximately 67 routes per day. And these men and women, they work in all kinds of weather conditions. If it's cold out, if it's today, they're out there working all day today. So, again, we have to be mindful of that. We have to constantly look at the route times and routes. We have a matrix that we look at. We have to adjust routes from time to time, but that is the only task system that we have in the Bureau.
Thank you. And for DCHD, I think that this is where I want to go back and forth with both of you to figure out if there's some efficiency, inefficiency, or more work that the council can do. So I don't know if who's controlling the slide. Is that you, Mr. Amoros? It's not you. If you could go back to the slide for DCHD that talks about the time from inspection to the time that they issue a notice for DPW.
Can I ask that?
One second, Councilwoman.
Mr. President, one more time, which slide?
I don't remember the number. If you keep going, I'll tell you when to stop. Up, go back one. One more. Okay, there we go. That's good enough. All right, so one of the most common things that, of course, we talk about this issue specifically ad nauseum is that someone, let's just say I call 311 because the lady at 4304 Hamilton Avenue hasn't cut her grass and it's now 10 inches and it's on July the 1st. so that the public can hear the specific time frames, walk us through how that happens. How many days until you get out there, and how many days from the time that you issue that first citation can DPW legally come out to cut that property?
Right. So in your scenario, you're talking about an occupied property, is that correct?
No, unoccupied.
Okay.
Vacant or abandoned.
Okay. So if it is a vacant building or a vacant lot, odds are we already have a violation notice on it. So when we respond out there, the inspector is going to photograph the site, determine that the grass is above 8 inches or there is trash and debris present. They'll return to the office and create a work order that day for Public Works to cut or clean or board that property. If by chance it is a property where we do not have a violation notice on it, then the inspector would issue a violation notice. For a vacant building, that is a 30-day notice. However, the inspector, if they mark that it needs to be cleaned or boarded, after 5 days, a boarding request is automatically generated, and after 10 days, a cleaning request is automatically generated, because those items in the notice have separate correct times than the overall notice does.
So, go back. Let's do both scenarios. So, let's just say that there isn't any citation notice at all on the property. It's one that is up some obscure place and we missed it. Walk us through that timeline.
If there's no notice at all, the inspector will photograph it, make documentation notes, return to the office, enter that into our system, generate a notice which will be mailed out the next day.
So, somebody stop. How many days? I know the answer, but we need to say it publicly. How many days from the time that I call 311 does that inspector get out on average?
3 to 4 days.
There we go. 3 days.
So within 3 to 4 days of that service request being created, we respond, we make our observations, complete our investigation. Within 24 hours, within one business day, they are tasked with entering that data into our system and generating the notice if necessary. That notice is mailed out through a separate process. The inspector doesn't have to do that. If it's a vacant building, it would be a 30-day notice. If it's a vacant lot or it's an occupied property with exterior sanitation, it would be a 10-day notice, because it's just a sanitation issue in that case. Those notices are mailed certified and regular mail. Upon reinspection, we would post the property with that notice if the violation still exists. And the work orders on a vacant lot or a vacant building notice would be created after that 10 days. And that's automatically put in our system and transferred over within minutes to the DPW bin.
So how many notices right now do you have pending in the city that are awaiting action from DPW?
So that would be work orders, and for cleaning, there are approximately 11,000 work orders, and for boarding, about 250.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, if I may let the councilwoman butt in before we go to Mr. Mr. Chalmers. Yeah, before we go to Mr. Chalmers.
Because you're asking a question I was going to ask, so if you don't mind. So here's my question about this, and maybe I just didn't hear while I was moving over here. Here's what it is. Something happens. I drive the inspector superintendent crazy, and about a property. All right, it's a vacant house, and it's got overgrown grass, and it's falling apart too. All right, and so he's very good. He gets his people get out there pretty fast. And I think you just answered this question, but I want to make sure I understand it. I want to find out when it is that whatever citation notice or whatever it is has now reached a point where the backup people that are out for DOT, who do the cleaning, the boarding, all this work, when has enough time elapsed that they are eligible under policy or law to go do the work and put a lien against the property? How soon can they do that? Now, I know there's personnel problems, that there's not 1 million people to cover everything, but forget that for a minute. How fast, after a citation or a notice or whatever we're calling it today, do we, the city, have the right to clean and lien?
For a violation notice, which is what would give us the authority to clean the property and bill and lien, 10 days.
10 days from
issuance.
The notice. We have the authority to do that, right?
Correct.
Now, one more thing, and then I'll leave you alone. I've got to go to a meeting. But one more thing, and here's what it is. All right, so you don't have enough people to do this. I know that. Now, you've got the best people in the world. In fact, when I walked into this room tonight, looking at everybody here, I said, these are the best people in Baltimore. These are the people in Baltimore City that I love the best, because they do all the work. Not all of it, but piles of it, everywhere. All right. So, but we don't have enough so when Northeast, Yvonne, gets the call, she's gonna try to find people to do the work. Now, what I'm thinking is liens are money, and we're talking about self-help above and beyond what sanitation, what agencies can do. Solid waste, above and beyond that. Why aren't we using this lien money to pay people in communities to do the work beyond what we have the capacity as solid waste to do? Why don't we have people in neighborhoods that are organized around an agreement of some kind, that are hiring people coming back home and using this lien money to pay them to do work that they continue to do in their own neighborhoods? Why not? And that's a big question for us late in the day. But that's what we need to do, I think, for sustainability of sanitation.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And a follow-up to that too. If you can have do you have a breakdown of the difference between the private lots that we are awaiting versus the ones where you're waiting for the city-owned properties?
They're all private.
I can provide that. I don't have that with me, but I do know, I've studied 2016 and 2018 data, and we create roughly, in both years, roughly 35,000 work orders to be cut and cleaned. In 2016, 28% of those were on city-owned properties. In 2018, almost 24% were on city-owned properties. So that's holding true as kind of being the breakdown currently.
Thank you. And Mr. Chalmers, willing to hear your response, but also just ask another question, because last year you started a thing where you have contractors handling the private lots, correct?
That's correct.
Yes, sir.
So, I'm sorry, Council President, can you answer that question again, please?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So this question is for both of you. I guess the first follow-up for both HD and DPWs is that, is there anything else from a policy or legislative perspective that you guys think you need from the City Council to make this process more efficient and happen quicker for citizens? And if you think so and don't have the total answer now, just you can let us know later. But I think that because this is one of the top things, as you know, this is, I talk to Yvonne only about lots, right? All the time, specifically about grass cutting and property and things like that. And we know what this means for all Baltimoreans because they're consistently complaining to all of us about it. So I think if there's anything else that we can do, and as you pointed out, we've worked on this a lot, what else we can do, and have we continued to look at other cities to see what they're doing as they're modernizing?
Just like to raise the fact that we have 14 budgeted crews to manage the entire property maintenance piece. We have budgeted 3 boarding crews for the entire city, and that's what we're tasked. That's what we have to manage. The 6,000 mayor city council properties and the 25,000+ citations that are written on private properties. We're working right now with 3 different vendors. The issue for me is having adequate resources to manage the volume of work that's coming in. It's 30 days right now we have 30 days to manage a cleaning or high grass and weed request, and we have a total of 7 days to manage the boarding request. So again, it's just resources and being in a position to go out there and manage what we have. And right now, we just don't have it.
And so, Mr. Chalmers, to go back to myself and the councilwoman's earlier point, if you were afforded the opportunity to do something innovative like the program from Philadelphia, and you think that that will be very helpful into managing what we have?
I believe so, and again, a member of my team is on that committee looking into that. I apologize that I can't give you an update on where we are, but we are a part of that conversation. Anything that's going to give us a helping hand. I'm also working with Chum Mark Washington on an initiative. He received a couple of grants, purchasing a surplus city vehicle, trying to do some things himself. So we're working on that. We're actually going to sit down with, we received a grant from Weinberg. So we're working on things, working with Park Heights Renaissance. They're also out there managing some of these lots. So it's not that we're not working and looking for innovative ways to manage this. That's all well and fine, but again, at the end of the day, I need some meat and potatoes on the table to manage the bulk of the work until we get to that point.
And thank you. And as everyone knows, anyone that has ever been to Chum knows and works for Mark Washington.
I work for Mark.
So we all do.
We all do.
But I think a follow-up for you in a second, but DCHD, anything policy related that you think that the council can be tackling on this issue specifically right now?
Yes. On policy legislative-wise, there's one thing that's in the wings that'll be coming forward with the building code, that update that's coming up, and it's in reference to the Philly Land Care model. When we started exploring that, and they fenced their lots, and a lot of the lots in Baltimore City, like probably 15,000 of the ones that need to be maintained, are privately owned. They're not city-owned lots. The bulk of the work that Mr. Chalmers' crews have to do are on private property that have been quote-unquote abandoned. We don't clearly have legal authority to go onto that property to fence it, although there's a strong argument that the fencing is a nuisance abatement tool, and so working with Ms. Knox and the mayor's office and the law department, we've come up with a process, and so that will, instead of introducing as a separate bill, we've added it in with the other code changes that are coming forth in the next month or so, with the building code update that has to be done every 3 years.
Thank you, and we would look forward to being briefed on that. And then the last thing I would say, I know that you'll remember, especially for areas in the city where there are not an abundance of vacant properties and there are not abundance of lots. A few years ago, I made the request of the state to allow us to offer a credit, a small credit for people who live next to a house that's unoccupied, and they take care of that property. This is something that I'm considering to asking for again, but wanted to see whether you guys, the experts, thought about that, because I think that we know. I grew up next to a vacant, and some other folks on our block in the 2500 block of West Coast Spring who just refused to cut their grass. Partially, I believe, because they knew that my dad would make me and my brothers do it, but we had to cut that vacant lot every time. It wasn't even a thought that my dad and my mom were going to allow us to call in 311, even though we had this nice, fancy yellow piece of paper in the refrigerator with Council President Clark's name and phone number on it. We were not allowed to do that. But if we have citizens who, and we know that there are some, are willing to do that, I think that we should figure out a way to provide them some assistance for other things, including property tax.
I definitely agree with you. You know, we're not going to be able to clean our way to a cleaner city. So we got to look at a different strategy. And if it's changing the culture. And if you have folks in the neighborhood engaged in the cleaning process, if it's right next door to their property, that can be contagious, and that can start to spread throughout the entire community. So we got to think outside the box. So I agree with you. That is a great strategy to try to manage some of these parcels of land that we have to deal with.
I would just add in, and I agree with Mr. Chalmers and say that Director Woods wasn't here this evening, but there are some other innovative programs in the city that are going on. Housing has had the Adopt a Lot program. There are about 500 lots that are adopted by communities and taken care of as side yards or neighborhood space. There's about 4,500 additional lots in the city that could be adopted if there was a community member or a community group interested in stepping up and doing that. And that information is available on our website. There's also qualified community managed open space, which is city-owned property that gets dedicated to a group to maintain, to ultimately be put into a land trust for permanent green space use. So that program has, I think, about 80 properties in it that are city-owned. I think there are other privately owned properties in that group. And then Director Woods has the Care a Lot program, and she is working with communities to have block captains taking care of properties. But all that is, education is the key piece in changing behavior. Enforcement has a major role in it. Getting the city clean has a major role in it. But to keep it clean, hold the territory, and win more, education is really the key. And there's little pieces that housing has done. There's little pieces that Public Works has done. There are little pieces that the Environmental Control has done. But right now, in my opinion, there is nobody's job to educate the public on making the city clean. And that's really what we need, is somebody responsible to lead that campaign of educating the students, educating their parents, educating all the residents of Baltimore City to keep the city clean. And when we do that and we are able to get it cleaned up, and then we can enforce against the knuckleheads who refuse to be educated and refuse to listen, then the other people that are coming into our city and dumping will be less likely to do it.
Thank you. I'm done, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, 1 second. Mr. Sharkey, I got a request from one of our colleagues who wasn't here. I'm just going to read the request as it was sent to me. DOT has recently committed to disallowing their contractor, Lorenz, to use any chemicals in fulfilling their mowing contract on the medians in the Mayfield neighborhood, specifically Crossland Avenue and Norman Avenue. This came after reports that dogs being walked in the neighborhood were made sick by exposure to chemicals, complaints of labor violations where the contractor's employees were applying the chemicals without protective wear, and environmentally conscious neighbors' general concerns over the impacts to groundwater quality and other natural concerns such as the health of bee and butterfly populations. DPW does not use any chemicals in the maintenance of their facilities, including all of the vacant lots and houses that the city owns, nor does Rec and Parks in its park mowing. Given the known risks, adverse impacts, and the fact that no other agency is using such chemicals, why is DOT allowing this at all?
So I would not classify it as no other agencies. Many of the other counties use this. This isn't for a particular, just here's grass. This is for in between cracks of medians and other places. So if you have grass growing up through cracks in medians, that is what this application is for. So to address a couple of these specifics, yes, the contractor was told not to do that. They did do that again, and they also were having labor violations, and they have been, they have been talked to, and we're also going to put into a bad purchasing report, so for that. So if you have a contract, you can put in a bad vendor report, or what's the technical term? Bad vendor report, yeah. So
Thank you, Director.
That was exactly the one question I was going to raise. Yes, I'm familiar with that situation because Councilman Dorsey and I kind of meet at that intersection that was being referenced. But I did want to just say, while we're having this discussion, which I gather is coming to an end, basically, I think it's very bad for us to, as a city government, to use pesticides. And I think that we shouldn't. And I'm not sure whether we've been preempted or not by the federal government. It was in the works. But I'm finding, at the moment, trying to find out if that's the case. And if we haven't been, we can certainly say what we would want our city agencies not to do. Feds can't preempt us there. So, I mean, I'm directing this at you because you just happen to walk into this job. But you're walking into it at a time when we're talking about a lot of environmental issues and health issues. And this is a problem for us to be, as a city, to be using pesticides. I'll just leave it at that, but it's the beginning of a long conversation that will end up ultimately, I think. Thank you for coming into this job, by the way. I haven't had a chance to say it. Welcome to DOT.
thank you, Councilwoman. And I do want to just mention that I have appreciated all the employees that I've worked with at DOT, especially Frank Murphy. Sorry, it's late. I'm on hour 13 right now. So especially Frank. Frank's been nothing but amazing through day one. I know Frank for 14 years, and he's just a true public servant, and he's just a traffic geek. So if you want to talk traffic, you could talk about it any time with any intersection, and it's always there's always a good story behind it. So again, but not just Frank, the other employees have really, the other chiefs and top level employees that I have met with have all worked with me and jumped right in, and I'm excited. And we can of course continue to talk about all the means and methods we use to keep the grass and roads and medians and everything else moving or
But
down.
it's all about people, really. And you got good ones, great ones. Good luck.
Thank you all for spending your evening with us. We're now in recess.
Always a pleasure, sir.